Chapter 530. She pressed her lips against his once again and told him vaguely with narrowed eyes. Because of your tolerance time and time again, I was constantly moved by you. Finally, I was able to break through the barrier in my heart and choose to be with you. This process was very long. Thank you for only knowing about this now. You gave me enough time to completely fall in love with you. I love you, Gong Dai. Gong Ju only felt his world explode with countless fireworks in an instant. So, I love you was such a beautiful word. He could no longer think of feeling wronged, afraid or complaining. His mind was completely bewitched by Gong Yimo. He felt that he only knew now that he had given her enough time. It was a very lucky thing. Momo, the two words flowed between his lips with endless sweetness. His dark jade eyes seemed to be filled with mist and his skin gradually turned red. Clearly, the stimulation of the three words "I love you" was no less than the best. He was moved and could no longer hold it in. He did not want her after the wedding. He wanted her now. Gong Dai's actions were a little intense and Gong Yimo was provoked by him. She giggled and resisted. She liked to tease him. She liked to see a cold person like him go crazy for her. Don't move. Gong Dai pressed her hand to the right side. Kisses rained down like a storm. Gong Yimo was kissed by him until she shrank her neck. So itchy. Her avoidance and refusal made Gong Dai's eyes burn even more. His dark eyes seemed to be a little red, but they emitted a kind of bewitching beauty. Don't move. Momo, Gong Dai's actions became more urgent. He tugged at her clothes and kissed her intensely. Gong Yimo was so ticklish that she laughed. Her resistance became more intense. She even sat up and leaned against the wall of the boat to catch her breath. No, it's too ticklish. Her eyes were filled with tears, and her white face was flushed red. Her hair was disheveled, as if she had been ravaged. Her soft voice was like a hook, hooking Gong Ju's reason and making him lose his mind in an instant. Gong Dai narrowed his eyes and suddenly pounced on her fiercely. He fiercely blocked her lips. However, she was sitting and leaning against the side of the boat. When Gong Dai pounced on her, the world instantly turned upside down. Gong Yimo's lips were still blocked by him, but she still subconsciously let out a muffled cry of surprise. The boat had capsized. The cool lake water made the two of them quiver. However, Gong Dai did not let Gong Yimo off the hook. Both of them could hold their breaths, so it was fine for them to stay in the water for the time being. However, it had to be said that it was Gong Yimo's first time kissing in the water. Gong Dai's and Gong Yimo's hair spread out in the water, floating and entangling like seaweed. The underwater sun was not dazzling at all. The light that shone down even turned the underwater world into a grotesque and variegated appearance. Gong Yimo quickly felt her back touch the bottom. The water was not deep, only a few meters. The small fish disappeared without a trace in an instant. The water was clear, and under the illumination of the light, it presented an indescribable magnificence. As for them, they were like outsiders who had accidentally intruded into another time. There was no sound around them. Even though they were in the slightly cold water, she could still feel how hot Gong Dai's body was. After the kiss, Gong Dai looked deeply into her eyes. In the water, they could not speak, but Gong Yimo could accurately receive the affection transmitted by those eyes. They were like seaweed entangling her, leaving her with no way to escape. Gong Yimo could not help but lean forward and give him a gentle kiss. In the water, the two beautiful human figures overlapped once again. The silver embroidery on the black robe was actually glowing in the water. It was entangled with Gong Yimo's light green muslin robe, as if they would never be separated again. Gong Dai hugged her tightly. There had never been a second like this, where he felt as if he had her. So he hugged her tightly, allowing their heartbeats to overlap as they kissed each other tightly. I'm completely yours now. Gong Dai could clearly read the meaning in Gong Yimo's eyes. I have always been yours. Gong Yimo was sure that Gong Dai had answered her like this. For a second, she felt that they were already married. The throbbing and sweetness that she had never felt before drowned them like water. It was just like a dream. Climbing out of the water, the two soaked rats looked at each other and could not help but smile. Gong Dai did not plan to hide it from her, so he directly told her. When we find the snow Ganoderma and come back, we will ask Father to host our wedding. No matter who stopped it, no matter what the world said, and no matter what the future generations wrote, this grand wedding would not be lacking. Gong Dai gently tucked her wet hair behind her ear. When the time comes, we will go into seclusion together. No. Gong Yimo shook her head. When she heard him talk about marriage, her heart could not help but tremble with joy. So she held his hand and told him firmly, we will not leave. We want to live in front of the world in a high-profile manner and let the world see how sweet we are. Gong Dai could not help but frown, didn't you? Always care about the world's opinion. He knew very well that the royal sister hoped that the world would like her, or at least not dislike her. He did not know the reason for this desire. Gong Yimo thought of the scene of her being cursed by the world in her previous life, and in this life, the man in front of her. Suddenly, she smiled sweetly. I was originally very afraid. She gently bit her lower lip, which was kissed by Gong Dai until it was red and swollen. But with you, I am suddenly not afraid. She playfully winked and hugged him as she said firmly. With you, it is enough. She did not want to care about the world's opinion anymore. When this thought came to her mind, she suddenly felt her whole body lighten. It turned out that everything in this world, whether it was right or wrong, would become shackles. Even beliefs and dreams. However, beliefs and dreams did not mean that they were wrong. Everyone lived with shackles on their backs, and they could even live very well. Gong Yimo chuckled softly. With shackles, there was motivation. But without shackles, it was a very relaxing thing. Had she fallen? Royal sister, Gong Dai could not help but hug her and whisper into her ear, I really want to get married tonight. He frowned slightly, but he felt that the girl in his arms deserved the best. Gong Yimo was in his arms, looking at the river in front of her, at the green mountains in the distance, and at the smoke coming out of the sparse houses. She smiled gently. As long as you are willing, every day will be a newlywed. She threw a coquettish glance at Gong Dai. As long as you are alive and happy, you don't need to worry about these things, and you don't need to feel burdened. As she said that, she straightened up and secretly looked at Gong Dai's figure. Because he was wet, his clothes were tightly clinging to his body. She smiled lecherously, how about starting from tonight? Newlywed. Royal sister. Gong Dai flew into a rage out of humiliation. What should he do if his beloved little vixen kept seducing him? Waiting online urgently. Chapter 531. To find the treasure of Snow City, she had to go to Wan City. But Gong Yimo only had 2 pieces of the map. After piecing together, she found that she was still missing 1 piece. So she decided to go to Long City with Gong Dai to meet a few people, and Gong Dai's people were all in Long City. From the looks of it, it seemed like they had occupied Long City. Gong Yimo first saw that crazy woman. She was Chiu Zhongchan's wife. Logically speaking, she had nothing to do with her. In her previous life, she only saw this woman when Chiu Zhongchan died and went back to see him for the last time. She really didn't know why she wanted to deal with her. In the end, she reaped the consequences of her own actions. Gong Dai originally wanted to find someone to cure the goo poison in her body. But he found that there was no cure when the goo poison flared up. Sometimes she would be awake, but when it flared up, the attack power was very strong. And she didn't recognize anyone. When Gong Yimo saw her, she had just calmed down. She looked at Gong Yimo with deep hatred in her eyes. That hatred made Gong Yimo have an illusion. Did she kill someone's entire family? Gong Dai coldly stared at the woman in the dungeon. She shrank back and no longer dared to look at Gong Yimo with that kind of gaze. Who sent you? Although the probability of getting an answer was very small, Gong Yimo still asked. Sure enough, the other party didn't say a word. Gong Yimo frowned. You used the goo poison to harm me, but didn't want me to find out. Is it because the mastermind doesn't want people to know about his existence? Wu Qi still didn't answer. She was lying in the dungeon in a sorry state. Only the occasional flash of fierce light from her messy hair proved that her eyes were open. Strange, cold. In her previous life, she had this kind of feeling towards this Grandmaster's wife. She didn't seem like a human, more like an emotionless killing machine. Gong Yimo moved closer. After returning, her martial arts had recovered little by little. So she didn't worry that Wu Qi would hurt her. Gong Yimo said softly. You wanted to use this poison to harm me but ended up harming yourself. But you don't have the antidote to save yourself. Can I assume that this poison has no antidote? Gong Yimo. She suddenly opened her mouth. That hoarse voice, like a 70 or 80-year-old woman. Wu Qi slowly raised her upper body. In the dungeon, her slow movements were like an evil spirit. You've betrayed your mission. Gong Yimo thought that this woman had gone crazy. Mission? She glanced at Gong Ju. How come I didn't know I had a mission? Mission? Wu Qi looked at her solemnly. The mission to destroy the world. Gong Yimo straightened up and helplessly said to Gong Ju, so he's a madman. But Wu Qi's wife's words, Wu Qi to Chio's, Wu's to Chio's Wu's, but Chiu Zhongchan's name didn't make the woman in the dungeon react. Chiu Zhongchan's life and death were unknown, but she didn't ask. She was really cold-blooded. Gong Dai pulled her into the dungeon, ignoring that crazy woman. He asked softly, who is that Chiu Zhongchan? Royal sister. What's your relationship with Yunding Mountain? Gong Yimo smiled, narrowed her eyes and said mysteriously, Yunding Mountain is my sect. When I was 3, Chiu Xingfeng and his master, Chiu Zhongchan, came to Dai Yu State to visit and took Long Hanyan away. But Chiu Xingfeng gave me a cultivation method by chance before he left. So in my heart, Chiu Xingfeng is my master, so the cultivation method in Royal Sister's hands was given to her by Chiu Xingfeng. But this didn't make sense. If it was only cultivation method, how could Royal Sister read and understand? Gong Yimo touched his head and smiled slyly, if there's a chance in the future, I'll tell you. But not now. She blinked her eyes and smiled mischievously. Then, she went into the depths of the dungeon. Her nominal grandmother was still waiting for her there. Gong Yimo's eyes flashed with a faint light. Although she didn't know where these enemies came from in this life, she wasn't afraid of the unknown and the challenge. Old Lady Xueqi didn't have any reaction when she saw her. Instead, Xuezhan looked at her coldly. Gong Yimo, Madam is your grandmother. How can you let Gong Dai treat her like this? He questioned her loudly. Gong Dai was indifferent, and Gong Yimo was the same. Grandmother. Gong Yimo held Gong Dai's hand. I didn't want to use me to kill the grandmother of my beloved. Shameless. Xuezhan was so angry that his beard stood up. Gong Yimo didn't care. She even kissed Gong Dai's face when she heard what Xuezhan said. If I had a sense of shame, you wouldn't have had the chance to kill my man. She touched her chin. Let me think. You did this because you wanted to use Gong Dai to threaten me. This method of secretly harming her in such a roundabout way was really the same as the person behind that crazy woman's back. Gong Yimou's mind suddenly flashed with inspiration. Bah! Shui Zhan said angrily, we just couldn't stand it. You are from the Shui clan. Instead of taking revenge for the Shui clan, you took the enemy as your father. The king of the Shui clan doesn't have a daughter like you. We controlled Gongju in order to force you to commit suicide. Gong Yimou narrowed her eyes and smiled slyly. Really? If Shui Wuxi didn't tell me the truth, maybe I would have believed it. She said it like it was the truth. But now, I already know that your motive is not so simple. Let's not beat around the bush. You poisoned Gong Dai to control me, and then you used a roundabout way to poison me. What is the Shui clan trying to do? Shui Zhan wanted to say something but Shui Wuxi's name silenced him. How did Gong Yimou know Wuxi's surname? Wuxi hid it so well. His moment of hesitation let Gong Yimou know that she had made the right bet. Instead, old lady Shui suddenly opened her eyes and said hoarsely. What Shui Wuxi? My Shui clan doesn't have such a person. Shui Zhan then realized that he might have been tricked and didn't dare to say anything. Gong Yimou giggled and said, there isn't such a person because she is already married. As for why you are here, let me guess. Old lady Shui was like an old monk in meditation, quietly staring at Gong Yimou. Gong Yimou leaned against Gong Dai, her snow-white fingers pulling at her chin, as if she was pulling at a non-existent beard. For you to personally take action, there are only two possibilities. 1. There is a disagreement within the Shui clan. Most people don't approve of your way of doing things, so you have no choice but to personally take action. 2. You didn't do your job well and made the person behind you angry. So in order to atone for your mistakes, you came up with this idea. Shui Zhan didn't know how to describe his feelings. Because Gong Yimou, she was so smart that it was scary. Chapter 532. You didn't do your job well. It can be reflected in that rock. You didn't make me trust you, made me not bring that rock with me. Gong Yimou touched the fake rock on her body, her gaze faint. It clearly looks the same. I am really curious, how can you be so sure that this rock is fake? The real rock was still in the Daiyu State Imperial Palace. After she returned from Yuqi, she went to confirm it that night. It was still there. Old lady Shui did not speak. Gong Yimou's clear voice was somewhat cold in the deepest part of the prison. I once read in some books, there is a type of meteorite from outer space. It contains radioactive substances. It can interfere with a person's thoughts. Gong Yimou did not understand, because this type of interference could not be controlled. It could only stimulate the nerves. What use was it? If it was useless, then why did they want her to bring that rock with her? You want to control me. Gong Yimou came to this conclusion, but in her heart she felt that this was nonsense. A piece of rock wanted to control her. This was the real world, not a fantasy world. The only explanation was that they wanted to control her, but they had other methods. This rock was only a very important part of it. Old lady Shui did not speak for a long time, and Shui Zhan was even more shocked. He felt that Gong Yimou was terrifying, because she was able to deduce the real result from the clues. Seeing that they did not speak, Gong Yimou laughed softly. Seems like you have nothing to say. Could it be that my guesses were all the truth? But she could not think, who could control the Shui clan, or borrow the Shui clan's hand to control her? What was the benefit of controlling her? She could not help but think of that crazy woman's words. She said her mission was to destroy the world. Gong Yimou laughed involuntarily. Since she could not think of anything, she might as well not think about it. She looked at old lady Shui. All right, let's not play guessing games. I want to go to the Shui clan's treasure, but other than the map you gave me, my mother left me a map. There is another map. Where is it? Old lady Shui moved hearing this. Her face twitched, as if she wanted to reveal a smile. You want to go to the treasure. Could it be that, before Shulian died, she didn't warn you again and again not to go? Gong Yimo pursed her lips. Father did say that mother had left me such a will. She didn't want me to go to the Shui family's treasure. She looked at old lady Shui with a burning gaze. Even if I ask you, you won't tell me the reason, right? Old lady Shui sat cross-legged in the prison, her pale white hair covering her face, making her look even more strange, her voice also broken and hoarse. If you want to find the Snow Clan's treasure, I'm happy to support you, but I don't know where the other map is. The old woman narrowed her eyes. She seemed to recall the scene of a map being torn apart by 3 people. But what I can tell you is that another map was taken away by an elder of the Snow Clan. He does not want the treasure to be discovered by the world, and he will guard the treasure. So, he must still be in the territory of Snow Country, which is near the present Wan City. She suddenly smiled darkly, looking at Gong Yimo. As for why your mother stole the map, and didn't want you to go find the treasure, this, won't you know when you find it? Gong Yimo hated when people kept her in suspense. But her maternal grandmother really did want her to go find the Snow Clan's treasure, otherwise she would not have told her so much. But Wan City was so big, how was she to find the legendary elder? The matter fell into a stalemate. Gong Yimo was very serious when she thought about the problem. She used a pen to write down all the clues related to the Snow Clan, thinking about the connections. She did not even eat. Gong Dai patiently waited at the side with a bowl. Royal sister, there is no need to be in such a hurry. Gong Yimo shook her head. There is a hurry. The sooner we find the Snow Ganoderma, the sooner father's illness will turn for the better. Gong Dai was a bit troubled. He looked at the table full of papers, then looked at the bowl in his hand. Then I'll feed you. Gong Emo nodded carelessly, her small eyebrows wrinkling. Apparently, she didn't take it seriously. Gong Dai smiled, then used a pair of chopsticks to feed her. Gong Yimo ate one bite at a time. Although she was not used to it, she did not feel awkward. The map was divided into 3 parts, Mother had one. Then, if Mother could snatch the map out of danger, the other 2 people must be of equal status to her, and then there was Wu Shi. She was really from the Snow Clan, then the mastermind behind this was very likely from the Snow Clan. And Wu Shi's words, she did not understand. What did she mean by her mission was to destroy the world? It was really confusing. At this moment, Gong Dai suddenly asked, Royal sister, where is the monkey? He rarely saw a royal sister with the monkey. When she was in Yuchi, although she brought the monkey to Yuchi, it was always by Chiyo who took care of it. She did not intervene. It was clear that she did not like the intelligent monkey, so why did she keep bringing it with her? Gong Yimo naturally knew what he meant. She explained, did you forget where we found the monkey? That monkey grew up eating people's hearts. It is very evil, so I brought it with me because I was worried. But I also felt that it was strange, so I did not get close to it. And this time, I left the palace through Zhaoyang Hall's tunnel, so I did not have time to take it with me. It should still be in Taiji Hall. As Gong Yimo spoke, her expression suddenly became serious. Gong Ju, do you still remember the words we saw when we were in the ruined temple? At that time, they had mistakenly entered the sacrificial site left behind by Snow Country. There were many dead people there, and the reason for so many deaths was because after Snow Country fell, some people held a grudge, so they held such a sacrificial ceremony to summon the evil spirit and destroy the country. Destroy the world. Gong Dai clearly also thought of the words, destroy the country and destroy the world, he saw on the stone pedestal. Combined with the words of the crazy woman Shui Wuxi today, she said that destroying the world was Royal Sister's mission. Gong Yimo seemed to be stunned, obviously also thinking of this. She was the person summoned by the Snow Clan to destroy the world. What kind of joke was this? Gongju couldn't help but comfort her. Sister Gong, don't worry too much. The people of Snow Country believe in evil gods and practice witchcraft. Most of the people have been brainwashed by their superiors to believe in resurrection and the ability to summon evil spirits. However, these things don't exist. As for why they came to you, perhaps it's because you are the daughter of their dead king, the only daughter. That's why they said it was your mission. But Gong Yimo could not help but think more. At that time, under the stone pedestal, it was recorded that the remnants of the Snow clan spent 4 years to hold a large-scale sacrificial ceremony. Not to mention whether it was effective or not, when she transmigrated in her previous life, she was 3 years old. Adding the time she was in her mother's womb, it was exactly the 4th year of Snow Country's destruction. Chapter 533. If it was a coincidence that she had transmigrated here at the same time as the sacrificial ceremony, then how could she explain what had happened afterward? She had indeed unintentionally taken out the Dharma artifact and caused a calamity. Didn't that directly correspond to the words carved on the stone pedestal, destroy the country and destroy the world? Also, why didn't these people appear to deal with her in her previous life? Was it because she had really caused chaos in the world by chance? Was that why the mastermind was so satisfied that they didn't appear? But didn't she later pacify the 4 countries? The more Gong Yimo thought about it, the more she felt like she was possessed. She felt a chill run down her spine. Was all of this really a coincidence? She felt that she couldn't think about it any further. Otherwise, she wouldn't feel good. But she still believed that there were no ghosts in this world. There must be another reason for all of this. Gong Dai saw that Gong Yimo's face had turned pale. He frowned slightly and spoke to her calmly. "Royal sister, look at me." Gong Yimo obeyed and looked at him with a confused expression. She had seen this face countless times, but it always stunned her every time. Gong Dai held her hand. "Royal sister, you've taught me since I was young that there are no ghosts in this world. People can have beliefs, but it's best to believe in yourself and not others." Gong Yimo nodded. She realized that Gong Dai really remembered every word she said. Gong Dai smiled. That smile calmed Gong Yimo's flustered heart down. "You also said that there are countless mysteries in this world. They may seem unsolvable, but the answer must exist. So don't be afraid of the unknown. Uncovering the mystery is also an interesting experience." Gong Yimo's heart gradually calmed down as she listened to his words. With Gong Dai around, it was very reassuring. Then, she was a little dazed. Did she really say all of this? It was too philosophical. Gong Dai saw that she had calmed down and lowered his head to plant a kiss on the back of her hand. "Don't be afraid. You still have me." This time, it really warmed her heart. Gong Yimo couldn't help but laugh. "I'm not afraid." He was just a little confused. "Don't worry, let's solve the mystery together. And that person who tried to deal with me, I must find him and see who he is." Gong Dai watched as she waved her little fists in a determined manner. Her pair of black jade eyes contained a faint smile. "Then, shall we eat first?" Gong Yimo leaned into his embrace. "I don't care, I still want to feed you." She shamelessly whined. Gong Dai half-hugged her and felt extremely sweet. "Okay, I'll feed you." Just like that, one ate while the other fed. The one who ate was happy and satisfied, but the one who fed was also full of happiness. Gong Dai sometimes thought that if he hadn't met the royal sister in this life, how boring and lonely would he have been. He definitely would not marry, because those people were not worthy of him, and he would not smile so much. He really could not think of anyone else in this world, other than her, who could make him feel the urge to smile, to have such a warm feeling, and to only hope that the years would be peaceful and quiet. There was one thing he didn't say. That was, if the royal sister was really the spirit of destruction, he was also willing to help her destroy the world. Destroy the world hand in hand and help the world hand in hand. As long as she wanted, as long as she was around. Gong Yimo and the group set off for Wan City. Since it was the Snow Clan's treasure, it must be in the former Snow Country. Then they had to come to Wan City. The streets were still the same as a few years ago. Gong Yimo even remembered how she met Qiu Xingfeng and Long Han Yan after she disguised herself. There were some things she didn't dare to think too deeply. For example, did Qiu Xingfeng return to Mount Yunding? For example, was Qiu Zhongchan still alive? If he was still alive, he would definitely come to save Xue Wuxi after he recovered. But she didn't know how much Qiu Zhongchan knew about Xue Wuxi. Mount Yunding shouldn't have been involved. Gong Dai held Gong Yimo's hand as they walked on the streets of Wan City. It was dusk, but once they appeared, they immediately attracted all the people's attention. The so-called Golden Boy and Jade Girl were just like this. Gong Yimo was a little dissatisfied with the girls who walked by and peeked at Gong Dai. Gong Ju had recently been living with Emo, and he looked as if he had a wife and everything was fine. Therefore, the smile on his face had also increased. He was no longer as gloomy as he used to be in the capital. Although he was still cold and cheerless, people could feel his calmness and gentleness when he held Gong Yimo's hand. So when Gong Yimo passed by a mask stall, she didn't even think about it and took a mask that exposed the nose and mouth and put it on Gong Dai. It's so beautiful. Don't take it off. Half of Gong Dai's face was covered, but his temperament was still charming. His red lips were slightly pursed and he had a kind of beauty that could topple the world. But his beauty was all for one person. I'll do as you say. The woman who bought the mask had probably never seen such a beautiful couple and couldn't help but say. Madam is so beautiful, and has good taste. This mask is very suitable for your husband. Gong Yimo was happy when she heard that and took out money to buy it. But Gong Dai paid the money and took another mask and put it on Gong Yimo. Madam is so beautiful, I also want you to wear it. His voice was low and hoarse, like flowing water, which made Gong Yimo blush. The woman at the stall looked at them enviously. She took the money but was a little embarrassed. This stall is small, I can't change this money. Young master, do you have something smaller? Gong Ju glanced at the woman. Her beautiful ink-black eyes were set off by the white mask. It was as if there was a flash of light flowing through them. No need, your business is doing very well. Such a sweet mouth, there must be a reward. Then he pulled Gong Yimo and left. Gong Yimo quickly went to look at other stalls. Gong Dai looked at Gong Yimo dotingly and felt sweet in his heart. Did they really look like husband and wife? This knowledge was really delightful. At this time, a female voice attracted Gong Yimo's attention. Girl. Let's close the stall and go home with mother. The little girl replied crisply, yes, mother. They may not know Gong Yimo, but Gong Yimo still knew them. It was shameful to say that when she went to look for the water cloud grass, she hired an old man who made a living by picking herbs. He was this woman's husband. Unfortunately, he died tragically in the hands of Long Han Yan. But she avenged them. Gong Yimo originally did not want to disturb their peaceful life. At that time, she had disguised herself and they could not recognize her. So she let this matter go. But who knew that at this time, the person at the stall next door suddenly shouted. Aunt Xue! Don't forget to go to the market tomorrow. Gong Dai knew what she was thinking. He could not help but pull her and whispered, Royal sister, this used to be Snow Country's territory. There are many people with the surname Xue. But Gong Yimo stared at the back of the mother and daughter. She felt that there was an unknown sixth sense. Chapter 534. Let's go back. Gong Dai asked Gong Yimo, but Gong Yimo thought about it and said with gritted teeth. There are many people with the surname Shui, but I know that woman's husband. He is an ordinary but not ordinary person. Perhaps he can be a clue. After saying that, she pulled Gong Dai and followed them. It was unknown where they lived after moving out of the hopeless forest. When the sky turned dark, Gong Dai followed Gong Yimo to the mother and daughter's house. It was still only the two of them. It seemed that the woman did not remarry. Hearing the knock on the door, the woman asked her daughter to open the door. After 3 years, the little girl had grown into a big girl. When she opened the door, she saw a man and woman who were so beautiful that they did not look like real people. She could not help but be stunned. Who is it? After hearing no sound for a long time, the woman walked out. She seemed to have gained weight again. There were layers of meat on her stomach and her eyes were very big. She looked very fierce. That's right, a woman was in charge of the household and had a daughter. How could she not be fierce? You are. She was also dazzled by the appearance of the two. Oh my, she had never seen such good-looking people in her life. Could it be that the fox in the mountains had turned into a demon? Seeing Gong Yimo smiling, wasn't she exactly the same as the little fox? Gong Dai pulled Gong Yimo's hand and then raised a prince's token. The imperial court is working. I hope that Madame Shui can make things easy for us. The woman was stunned. She clearly did not expect the two of them to be officials. Although she was flustered, she still moved to the side to let the two of them in. She frowned and thought for a while before smiling apologetically. How could I be a madam? Official, please have a seat. This, if you have something to ask, this madam will tell you everything she knows. Gong Dai looked at Gong Yimo and Gong Yimo said with a smile. Is your husband's surname Shui? The woman pulled her daughter to the side and sat down. Hearing this, she rubbed her hands uneasily. Are you here for my late husband? But my late husband has already passed away for a few years. She wanted to cry as she spoke, but her daughter was curiously looking at Gong Dai. She had never seen such a good-looking person before. Gong Yimo did not notice this. What's your husband's name? She was the one who buried her, but she didn't know her name. The woman frowned and lowered her head. My husband's surname is Shui and his first name is Xiao. He's just an ordinary herbalist. Everyone in our village knows that. Gong Yimo smiled comfortingly. Don't be afraid. We are here to help you. To be honest, your husband has something very important in his hands. It might bring you a fatal disaster. We are from the imperial court, and we are here to settle this matter. Gong Yimo began to spout nonsense. It would have been fine if he hadn't thought about it before, but now that he thought about it, that old man was really different. He even knew about the water cloud grass and fire cloud grass, and he even knew about their medicinal properties. It should be known that 80% of the pharmacopoeias did not have any records of this type of accompanying plant. Only a few families with profound knowledge would know a little about it. So Gong Yimo felt that no matter whether it was true or not, she should trick her first. Sure enough, her words frightened the other party. Even that little girl stopped staring at Gong Dai, and instead pulled her mother to ask. Mother, do we have such a thing in our house? The woman glanced at her and patted her hand before speaking to Gong Yimo. To be honest, the reason why I can have a house in town and even have a small business is because my late husband helped a nobleman. Speaking of this, her eyes flickered. Although I received 100 taels, my late husband also lost his life because of it. Our house is already so poor that even thieves don't come. How could there be anything important that would be coveted by others? Gong Yimo frowned. This is a serious matter. Why don't you think about it again? For example, did your husband say anything strange or leave anything strange behind? At this moment, the little girl interrupted. Father's words are very strange, but they also make sense. Wang Nan. The woman glared at the little girl with dissatisfaction, and then shook her head firmly. I'm sure. There's nothing special in our house. My late husband didn't say anything. Where's the map? Gong Yimo suddenly took out a piece of parchment. Something like this. Is there really nothing? When she took out the map, Gong Yimo stared at the little girl. She saw that the little girl was confused at first, then suddenly widened her eyes as if she had thought of something. At that moment, Gong Yimo was sure that she had guessed correctly. The woman was stunned at first, but when she saw Gong Yimo looking at her daughter, she quickly hugged her and said, "We don't have that kind of thing in our house. Please leave." Gong Yimo knew what was going on. She slowly pushed a banknote on the table. Madam Shui, to be honest, this map is useless to you. It might even bring you trouble. After all, if I can find you, others can also find you. Just like this little girl's name. Gong Yimo looked at the little girl. Shui Wangnan. Plus, your husband guarded Hopeless Forest every day when he was alive. Don't you think I can understand that there's something interesting in the south of Hopeless Forest? Gong Yimo's words made the woman tremble. No. I don't understand what you're saying. At this moment, the sound of metal flowing slowly could be heard. Gong Dai pulled out his narrow sword, and the two women widened their eyes in shock. Do you understand now? Gong Yimo's eyes were wide open. How could this be? Gong Dai's murderous aura frightened the little girl. The woman had never seen such a scene, and she softly cried out and hugged her daughter tightly. Under Gong Dai's cold ink-black eyes, her scalp went numb. For a moment, she thought that Gong Dai was really going to kill her. So she couldn't lie anymore, and she said in a trembling voice, since you're so smart, you should know that you can't go to that place. Originally, she followed her late husband's instructions and didn't tell anyone. However, this man didn't look easy to get along with. She was a widow and an orphan, so she had to tell him. And this has nothing to do with Wang Nan. I've been married to my husband for decades, and he's always been an ordinary person. We don't know what kind of map it is. My late husband didn't say much, and we don't know why you're looking for us. She was just a woman, so how could she have experienced something like this? Seeing Gong Dai's ferocious look, she quickly spilled the beans. Thinking back to her poor and bitter life, she never thought that her husband was any different from other people. She didn't expect something like this to happen after his death. Gong Yimo smiled. Your husband and I have a history. You can think of it as me coming to you today is fate. The woman hugged her daughter in silence. After a while, she spoke. We really don't know anything. We can give you the map, but you have to guarantee our safety. Chapter 535. She was not a member of the Snow Clan, and she was a woman. Although she knew the importance of the map, she did not have any concept of it. Now that someone had come knocking on her door, she felt afraid. She only wanted her and her daughter to be safe. As for the consequences of giving out the map, she did not care. Gong Yimo smiled, deal. She couldn't help but think of the wise old man. If he was still alive, he definitely wouldn't have handed over the map so easily. However, he died in an accident. Sometimes, she really felt that many things seemed to be arranged by the underworld. It was just that she didn't really believe in this kind of arrangement. But she believed in her sixth sense. Perhaps there really was something interesting in that treasure trove. The woman hesitated for a moment, then took her daughter to the side and cut open a piece of black leather hanging on the wall. Why would it be placed in such a conspicuous place? But it was not conspicuous. The leather was covered with oily leather. If she did not cut it open, it was really difficult to find a different world. And that map fell into Gong Yimo's hands so easily. Gong Yimo held the leather paper, somewhat in disbelief. Your husband really did not say anything. The fat woman was at a loss, frowning and stammering. He only repeatedly warned that the map could not be given to others. He said that if it fell into the wrong hands, the world would be in chaos. In fact, the woman did not believe that there was treasure in Snow Country. Even if there was, there would not be much money in it. After all, Snow Country was not rich at all. So she always felt that her husband was making a fuss over nothing. So what if the treasure was taken away by others? It was because she thought so that when she gave it away, she did not feel that it was a pity. Gong Yimo looked at the cut leather and suddenly pursed her lips into a smile. The old man collected herbs for a living. This leather appeared a bit abrupt. Did your husband have any close friends in the mountains when he was alive? The woman hesitated when she heard this. Yes, there was one. She uneasily pinched her apron. That person was very powerful, but his personality was not very likable. He was also blind. My husband pitied him, so occasionally he would give him some food. We were not very close. Then where is he? The woman glanced at her daughter and suddenly felt a little strange. He is at the Southern Peak Bridge in the Hopeless Forest. In other words, Wang Nan was actually referring to a person. Gong Yimo was satisfied with the clues and went back with Gong Dai. Then, Gong Dai sent people to settle the mother and daughter down. When he returned to the room, he found that the royal sister had put the map together and dripped her blood on it. However, reading maps was not her strong point. She really did not know where these lines were. However, she was very smart. The map she obtained today must have drawn the surroundings of the hopeless forest. After all, the dead old man was one of the guardians of the treasure. Then, he must have lived not far from the treasure. Therefore, the range had shrunk by a lot. However, Hopeless Forest was also very big. This map, where exactly was it drawn? Gong Yimo scratched her head, unable to think of anything. Gong Dai saw her kneeling on a stool, her entire upper body lying on the desk, looking like she didn't want to come out or sleep. He couldn't help but walk over and say softly, "Is it very difficult?" It was rare for the royal sister to be troubled by something. Gong Yimo's eyes lit up when she saw him coming over. "Quick, come and help me. I have a headache when it comes to mountain topography and location." When Gong Dai heard this, he didn't know why, but he suddenly thought of the time when she had figured out all the snow mountains, locations and heights in the West Continent in order to understand the topography of the West Continent. So, the reason why he was able to determine the location of the Well Canal so quickly in the West Continent was because she had done a lot of homework for him. However, his baby, was geography so troublesome? Gong Dai kissed her face, but Gong Yimo's eyes were still glued to the map. Gong Dai couldn't help but lift her chin. "Royal sister, I'll look at the map. You can just look at me." He smiled slightly. His dark jade eyes seemed to contain millions of stars. "I'm better looking than the map." Gong Yimo widened her eyes and was speechless for a while. Then you look." Gong Dai really went to look at the map. Gong Yimo touched her face and secretly stared at his face. The room was brightly lit. Gong Dai's side profile was slightly lowered. Every line was unbelievably perfect. How could there be such a good-looking person in this world? Gong Yimo propped her elbows on the table and stared at him motionlessly with her face cupped in her hands. All the hurt and nightmares from her previous life seemed to have been soothed in an instant. She felt very peaceful and happy. She couldn't help but think. Perhaps there were people in this world whose purpose was to soothe your life, to make you forget all the bad things and subconsciously cherish the people in front of you. This map should be in the hopeless forest. I've already memorized the blueprint. I'll go to the hopeless forest to take a look tomorrow to confirm its location. Gong Yimo nodded and reached out to him. Hug, her voice was soft and her body moved. Obviously, kneeling on the bench made her knees uncomfortable. Gong Dai hurriedly reached out and carried her in his arms like a princess. She had already washed up, so her hair was not tied up. When he carried her, her soft and shiny hair swayed gently in the air. Under the light, her hair was glowing red. Gong Yimo yawned slightly. I'm sleepy. Gong Dai took off her shoes and covered her with a thin blanket. Now that their hearts were particularly close, Gong Dai felt that his patience had never been so good. He felt very happy when he hugged her. As long as she did not make a fuss, he could usually hold it in. However, he tried his best not to sleep with her. It was only for a short period of time, and he was afraid that he would accidentally fire. After all, this little vixen was very annoying, so he left a goodnight kiss between her brows. Gong Yimo suspected that he was the same person as in her previous life. So before he left, Gong Yimo pulled his sleeve. How about staying and sleeping together? Under the shadow, her bright black eyes blinked, and the quiet night suddenly had a playful taste. Gong Dai readily followed her advice and really laid down beside her. Gong Yimo rubbed against his chest in satisfaction, and suddenly felt a little emotional. Unknowingly, you've already grown so big. So big that he could completely encircle her body in his arms, so big that he could give her peace, stability, and a sense of security. Time flies so fast, Gong Dai stroked her hair. The young man's heart was satisfied at this moment. That gentle look was definitely unique in the world. Is it fast? He laughed softly. He still felt that it was too slow. In those days without her, he was constantly forcing himself to become stronger, stronger. Those days were very fulfilling, but also very difficult to endure. Fortunately, all his efforts were rewarded. Was there anything luckier than this? Gong Yimo nodded. Sleep. Chapter 536. In the hopeless forest, on the southern peak bridge, there was a crumbling thatched hut. A blind man was eating. The food he was eating could be said to be coarse and unrecognizable. However, he seemed to have lost his sense of taste and only ate to fill his stomach. A young man dressed in luxurious clothes stood by the side. He felt that there was no place for him to stand in this house. Not to mention sitting down. I can't believe that the great elder who is the best in martial arts has fallen to such a state. TSK. How pitiful. The man dressed in luxurious clothes was still fanning himself in the autumn, looking like a rich scholar. However, the blind man smelled the rancid stench in the air. He put down his broken bowl and said in a low voice. Whose skin did you cut off this time? Get out of my house quickly. That stench makes me lose my appetite. The blind man's words made the man close his fan. He was angry. However, as the blind man said, this skin was not his own. Therefore, although he was angry, even if his eyes were fierce enough to devour a person, the corner of his mouth still had the same smile as before. That smile seemed to be carved on his face and did not change at all. It's okay. You can be fierce to me, but don't scare the delicate guest who will be coming later. She's really smart. She got the whole map in one go. Poor thing. I spent 10 years and couldn't find it. So you actually gave it to Xue Xiao. That person was born invisible. No wonder I couldn't think of him. As he spoke, he sighed regretfully. If only I knew earlier. I would have killed Shueshao and sent the map directly to her. I wouldn't have to wait so long. His words finally moved the blind man. He glared at the man. No one can go to the Holy Land. Over my dead body. When he said this, the aura of his body exploded. It made the man in luxurious clothes take a few steps back. However, he still had that smile on his face that seemed to be measured with a ruler. He said softly. She's destined to destroy the world. You can't stop her. The blind man sneered and stretched his body exaggeratedly. Only people like you who are blinded by greed will believe in sacrifices and evil gods. Get out of my house quickly. Looking at you makes me sick. Don't worry, as long as I'm alive. Don't even think about entering the Holy Land. The finely dressed man sneered and didn't force it. He couldn't find the map, but Gong Yimo could. He couldn't enter, but he could follow Gong Yimo. He believed that the girl would not disappoint him. After all, he had already waited for so many years, a few more days wouldn't make a difference. With that thought in mind, he left leisurely with a smile on his face, but his eyes were incomparably cold. After waiting for so many years, was it finally here? Not long after he left, Gong Yimo arrived. Seeing that the door was wide open, she stuck her head out and asked, "Is anyone here?" The clear and melodious voice was very pleasing to the ears. Just by hearing the voice, one could tell that it was a quick-witted girl. Blind's hand paused. This girl was Shulian's child. Gong Yimo saw that no one responded, so she walked inside curiously. However, Gong Dai pulled her behind him and walked in first. This room was really too dirty. Gong Dai frowned and then saw the mighty man sitting in the dark. As expected, it was a blind man. Who is it? This place doesn't welcome strangers. Get out. Blind suddenly said, his voice full of impatience. But his face was facing Gong Yimo. He could smell Gong Yimo's scent, that kind of sweet, bewitching smell. Gong Yimo was startled by his unkempt appearance. She quickly hid behind Gong Ju, and the blind man also looked over. Is he really blind? She said, I'm not a stranger. I'm Shulian's only daughter. She saw that the other party was calm, and obviously knew her identity. She couldn't help but ask, You're the elder of the Shulian clan? Gong Yimo immediately understood the key point. That's right, that herb-gatherer old man didn't know martial arts, but the elder of the Shulian clan should know martial arts. Perhaps, this person was the elder, and that dead herb-gatherer old man was a witch doctor. It had to be said that Gong Yimo was right again. After all, if she could find this place, others could definitely do it too. If the thing was left with him, even if his martial arts were high, it wouldn't be safe. It was better to leave it with someone else, someone who no one could guess. But the only thing she didn't expect was that this elder's martial arts were higher than she thought. He sat there without moving, but the words he spoke were like a bell, and his aura was oppressive. So what if you're Shulian's daughter? Leave immediately. Otherwise, I'll let your blood splatter here. His voice wasn't very loud, but when it fell into Gong Yimo's ears, she felt dizzy. She secretly raised her guard. This man's martial arts might be above hers. I can leave if you want. Gong Dai supported Gong Yimo, and coldly stared at the man. Gong Yimo signaled Gong Dai to be at ease, and said, Now that I have the whole map, I can go find the Snow Country's treasure at any time. I'm here to ask you a few things. If you answer, I'll leave immediately. The blind man was silent for a moment, and after a while, he impatiently said, Quickly ask. If you ask, scram. Gong Dai slightly raised his eyebrows. This man actually dared to speak to the royal sister like this. Gong Yimo was afraid that Gong Dai would be angry, and hurriedly asked directly. It said that the Snow Country's treasure is in the Snow Country's sacred land. Then why don't the Snow Country's people know where the treasure is, and still rely on the treasure map to find the location? And who is the person who always secretly wants to control me? You must know all these. When the blind man heard this, he suddenly laughed strangely. He stood up, and casually sized up Gong Yimo. Knowing that he couldn't see, but Gong Yimo still didn't like being stared at like this, as if there was nowhere to hide. Snow Country's treasure, sacred land. The blind man sneered, only Shuel Yen can freely enter the sacred land, other people naturally don't know where it is. Gong Yimo didn't understand, and waited for him to continue. The blind man stood in the shadows, and Gong Yimo couldn't see his face clearly. She only knew that he was a tall but very sloppy person. In the past, the sacred land and the royal family didn't invade each other. The sacred land was isolated from the rest of the world. My master was the last holy elder of the sacred land, and it was also him who gathered the results of the predecessors, and the treasure that had existed for 100 years in the sacred land, and obtained a terrifying thing. When he said this, he didn't seem to care, and summarized it in a few words. When the treasure appeared, the news spread like wildfire. After the Snow Country's king knew, he became greedy. Even if he knew that this thing had terrifying side effects, but he still coveted it. First, he thought of a way to marry my master's daughter, which is Shuel Yen, and then, with Shuel Yen's hand, he stole a part of the results. Chapter 537. The blind man sneered, "Your poor mother thought that the man truly loved her and risked being beaten to death by master to steal some of the things. But this is not the scariest thing. The scariest thing is that people are always greedy. The king wanted to get all the results and the Holy Land. However, in the depths of the Holy Land, there were layers upon layers of restrictions left behind by the ancestors. Only the Holy Elder and his bloodline could open the restrictions. Thus, he bewitched Shuel Yen and took advantage of the wedding to poison his master and everyone in the Holy Land. And I escaped because I stayed behind to guard the Holy Land. I originally wanted to kill that bastard. But Shuel Yen was pregnant and begged me. Coincidentally, the people of Daiyu State attacked us. With both internal and external troubles, I had to help my people. Then, Shuel Yen was kidnapped by the Emperor of Daiyu State to cure the poison." He paused. When he said this, he spoke quickly and without emotion, only impatience. After Shuel Yen came back, she said that Daiyu State agreed to withdraw their troops, but the king was not willing. He felt that the Emperor of Daiyu State was right in front of him and this was a rare opportunity. As long as he could get the thing in the Holy Land, Snow Country could use this opportunity to kill the king of Daiyu State and even swallow up Daiyu State. This temptation was too great. So he begged Shuel Yen to bring him into the Holy Land. Shuel Yen would rather die than obey, so the king threatened to kill her. And this matter was known to the Emperor of Daiyu State. After Shuel Yen cured him of the poison, he fell in love with Shuel Yen. Now that he saw that someone wanted to hurt her, he naturally would not allow it. So the army attacked Snow City and Snow Country ceased to exist. In this way, it could be considered as preventing a catastrophe. Gong Yimo listened to him talk for so long and said angrily, "So you want to tell me that in this world, only I can enter the Holy Land, right?" She put her hands on her hips, "Get to the point. Don't you know that I'm in a hurry?" The blind man was angry when he heard this. "What do you know, you brat? Do you know what that thing is? You only want to go to the Holy Land. You won't even know how you died." Gong Yimo rolled her eyes. "I've heard the Snow Clan say that they can resurrect a person's soul. Ha 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 ha, do you think I'm a 3-year-old kid?" The blind man was provoked by her obvious impatience and said with a cold smile, I won't go so far as to reincarnate, but I can still dominate the world. How about it? Are you tempted? Gong Yimo scoffed. I'm not brainwashed by the evil god. Do you think I'll believe you? I'll know what's inside once I take a look. After talking for so long, you still haven't told me who the mastermind is. Blind was irritated by her words and snorted. Since you're so powerful, why don't you investigate it yourself? Gong Yimo had never seen such a petty man before. Goodbye. I won't see you off. The blind man turned his head away in disdain, as if he didn't want to see him. Gong Yimo didn't even turn back as she pulled Gong Dai away. But once the two of them came out, they calmed down a lot, especially Gong Yimo. Her impatient look disappeared and she looked at Gong Dai with a headache. How much do you think we can believe in his words? Gong Dai definitely didn't believe a single word. If he wanted to know something, he could investigate it himself. But looking at Gong Yimo's expectant eyes, his eyes curved and he chuckled. 30%. Gong Yimo was satisfied and nodded. I think so too. 30% and no more. Then are we still going? Gong Dai meant that it was still early. Should they follow the map to find the treasure? Gong Yimo shook her head. That person just now was very loyal to his master. But his master was poisoned to death. My mother didn't live up to expectations and did something wrong because she was seduced by a man. The people in the Holy Lands are all dead. He hates me, no. I should say that he hates everyone who covets the Snow Clan's treasure. So he definitely doesn't want anyone to find the treasure. Gong Yimo looked at Gong Dai and blinked. If you don't want anyone to find the treasure, would you still keep the treasure map? Gong Ju naturally wouldn't. He also guessed that the one in the treasure map given to him by the blind man in Xue Zhao's hands was fake. Maybe there will be clues. The fake entrance would definitely be filled with traps, but there would definitely be clues. This was the reason why he wanted to take a look. Gong Yimo thought for a while and her eyes turned. She leaned over and whispered in Gong Dai's ear. That's right. If I'm the only one who can enter the treasure, the mastermind might want to control me because of this. Why don't we beat him at his own game, and use the fake treasure to trick him? After saying that, she kissed Gong Dai's ear. The tip of his ear turned red. He glanced at Gong Yimo. She was cold but full of charm. Seeing Gong Yimo's smiling face, he couldn't help but sigh. Baby, can you stop seducing me and do something serious first? He was still waiting to get the snow Ganoderma for his wedding. Seducing you is also a serious matter. Gong Yimo said as if it was a serious matter. The trees rustled and the sunlight shone on her face through the gaps of the leaves. Her face was rosy and was extremely cute. Ever since she was sure that Gong Dai wouldn't act rashly before the wedding, Gong Yimo had been acting. Thinking of ways to seduce him had almost become a kind of fun between them. As for the treasure. Sorry, Gong Yimo and Gong Dai didn't believe that a backward country that worshipped witchcraft would have any treasure. At most, those people had spread rumors about it and there was no need to believe it. Gong Dai had a headache. His royal sister was getting more and more naughty. Gong Yimo opened a pair of bright big eyes and pulled him and acted coquettishly. I'm tired from walking. Can you carry me around and walk around? What she meant was for Gong Dai to carry her around to check out the terrain. Anyway, the map was already imprinted in Gong Dai's mind. They just had to look at it on the spot. How could Gong Dai resist? He directly carried her in his arms like a princess. His arms were very strong. Not only was he talented in martial arts, he was also 10,000 times more hardworking than Gong Yimo. Just based on physical strength, Gong Yimo was far from being his opponent. Therefore, carrying someone on the mountain path was a piece of cake. Gong Yimo ate snacks in his arms and watched Gong Dai walk to the top. Only by standing at the highest point could one have a panoramic view of the surrounding terrain. He took one step at a time, his step steady. Gong Emo curled up in his arms, not to mention how safe she was. They walked for a long time just like that. Gong Dai, I suddenly thought of something. Her soft voice was as delicate as a kitten's. The sound that came from his throat rang softly in Gong Yimo's ears. She mumbled softly with her eyes half closed. I love you, but you've never said that you love me. She closed her eyes and frowned, as if she was very dissatisfied. Gong Dai couldn't help but smile and didn't say anything. He always wanted to save the best for the day of their wedding. At that time, she could listen to it as many times as she wanted. Finally, he reached the top in one step. The 4 directions were under his feet, but the little one in his arms fell asleep sulkily. Gong Dai stood in the air and said softly with a smile. My love for you is above the heavens and earth and will not be destroyed for 10,000 years. Gong Yimo rubbed against him, but she still didn't hear him. Chapter 538. When Gong Yimo woke up, it was already evening. They were sitting on the edge of the highest cliff. The wind was biting cold, and below their feet was a bottomless abyss. There was a large patch of sunset in the sky. The blue of the night sky was suppressing the purple and red rays of the sunset. It was like an intense collision. A few stars impatiently appeared and dotted the top of their heads. In this kind of evening, the peaks of the mountains below were covered in a layer of orange, contrasting with the green mountains. Occasionally, birds would fly by. The world was vast, and one's heart would tremble. Gong Yimo was stunned. After seeing it, she felt that it was a pity. If only there was a camera. It was such a pity that such a beautiful scenery was not recorded. Gong Dai hugged her and put his coat on her. He was waiting for her to wake up and see the world. In the past, he had always heard from the royal sister that the world was very big and there were many beautiful scenery. However, after going to so many places, he realized that it was not that the scenery was not beautiful, but that it lacked that person who could make you calm down and look at the world with peace of mind. Now that she was here, the beauty of the sunset in the mountains was shocking. Gong Yimo leaned in his arms and looked at it without blinking. It was as if the scenery was intoxicating and made her feel unreal. She even felt that she was not real. Such a perfect boyfriend, such a perfect relationship, did it really belong to her? She was afraid that when she woke up, she would wake up to a battlefield. She was even afraid that when she woke up, she would return to the modern world. Because here, there was a man that she could not bear to part with. She sat up and carefully looked at the man behind her. You're real, right? She asked a very stupid question, but asked it very seriously. Gong Dai looked at her quietly with his clear eyes. There was a smile in his eyes that was softer than the setting sun. You're real, and I'm real. Whether it's real or fake, I'll follow you. When Gong Yimo heard this, she shyly blinked and revealed a proud smile. Then, you're not allowed to leave me forever. What I say is always right. You have to listen to me. The wife at home is too strong. The family rules are only for you. Is that okay? Gong Dai was amused by her series of requests. He reached out and touched her little face. Because of the strong wind on the cliff, her little face was a little cold, but the texture was like soft jade, making him unable to put it down. You're right. I'll always listen to you. There's only the wife's authority in the family, not the husband's authority. The family rules are only for me, not you, in the end, he said firmly in his uniquely pleasant voice. I will never leave you. Gong Yimo's heart started to race. This must be love. This must be love. Falling in love would cause a woman's IQ to drop. It would cause a woman to ask a few questions over and over again. She would hope that the other party would patiently and resolutely tell her everything she wanted to hear. Gong Yimo couldn't help but lean forward. She closed her eyes and gently kissed him on the lips. This kiss was as light as a feather, but in the dazzling sunlight, at the edge of the lonely and spacious cliff, the light shone through the gap between the two of them kissing. When the two of them hugged each other again, only a complete shadow was left behind them, inseparable and without any gap. They whispered sweet nothings at the edge of the cliff for a long time. Naturally, they had to get down to business. Gong Dai compared the surrounding mountains and found the location marked on the map. It was close to the hopeless forest, hidden in a primitive forest. If they didn't have the map, it would be really difficult to find the entrance. They went back first. The next day, Gong Dai brought people to surround the area. If the fake entrance was here, the real one must be nearby. Gong Yimo was thinking about the person who had been spying on her. She was thinking about how to trick him into going in. That person must be nearby. She didn't know how he hid himself, but she didn't notice him at all. There were only two possibilities. First, that person's martial arts was higher than hers. But this possibility was too small. Second, that person was like Chiu Zhongchan. He had learned some assassin skills and had some achievements. That was why he could hide from them. The group of people searched in the mountains for a long time and finally found the fake entrance. It was hidden in the mountain stream. There were snakes, insects, rats, and ants everywhere. Gong Dai was afraid that the grass on her feet would itch. Because Gong Yimo's skin was too soft, he kept her in his arms and let the others guard far away. He brought Gong Yimo in. No one had set foot on this land for many years. Every step Gong Dai took, he would sink deep into the fallen leaves on the ground. So he walked very slowly. Finally, they walked in front of a mountain wall. Under the cover of the trees, there was a very inconspicuous circular stone door in front of them. If they didn't know the direction, it would be like looking for a needle in a haystack. Gong Yimo's idea was very simple. That was to open the stone door and go in. At the same time, she wanted to see if there was really someone following them. She didn't have any fear of this place. After all, she didn't think that the ancient people's mechanism would be so delicate that it could do anything to her. Her goal was just to catch the hidden person. There was a small groove on the stone door. Gong Yimo reached out and twisted it. With a buzzing sound, the door opened by itself. The design was very delicate. After the door opened, the space inside wasn't big. This was good. It was convenient for her to catch the person. So she and Gong Dai walked in with a torch in their hands. They didn't close the door. In front of them was a long passageway. As Gong Yimo walked, she guessed, according to the previous technology, the mechanism in this place shouldn't be very clever. At most, the poison would be more powerful. After you and I recuperate, there shouldn't be a big problem. But if this is a fake entrance, then the real entrance shouldn't be far from here. It's even possible that the real entrance and the fake entrance are connected. Gong Dai pulled her hand. No matter what, we can't be careless. Gong Yimo nodded. Her hand moved carelessly and sprinkled some powder behind them. Gong Yimo had many good things in her hands. Gong Dai knew that, so he didn't care. The torch in his hand lit up this small area. They didn't feel afraid. Snow Country pursues witchcraft and believes in evil gods. What do you think they've researched in the sacred lands for so long? Feeling bored, Gong Yimo asked Gong Dai curiously. Insects. Gong Dai was already prepared to see a bunch of insects in the treasure. After all, in this mountain, weren't insects the most abundant? Gong Yimo shivered when she heard this. Terrifying. She had actually forgotten a very important matter. That was that she hated those fleshy insects very much. Very much. At this time, a fragrance suddenly came near. Gong Yimo instantly turned around. The prey had taken the bait. Chapter 539. That powder was actually nothing special. It was just the perfume that Gong Dai had given her. This perfume would only release its fragrance when it was heated up. When she sprinkled it behind her, it would be fine if no one passed by. But when someone passed by and the powder stuck to the soles of their shoes, the friction caused the perfume to release its fragrance. However, he might have thought that the smell was coming from Gong Yimo. After all, Gong Yimo had walked this path before. At this moment, when Gong Yimo smelled the fragrance, she immediately turned around. The other party still did not know what had happened. But he had been discovered by Gong Yimo. But it was too late for him to run away because Gong Dai had already sealed off his escape route. What made Gong Yimo disappointed was that that person looked like a young man from his figure. Gong Yimo guessed that the person who had schemed against her should be around the same age as her mother. This person was so young, so it was clearly not her. He was not Gong Dai's opponent. In the end, he was fiercely pressed against the wall by Gong Dai with one hand. Gong Yimo was happy to see this. Seeing that that person's hands were being suppressed by Gong Dai's other hand, she was not afraid that the other party would play any tricks. She skipped over to follow him. She curiously looked at that black-clothed person. His disguise was very good. Even after such an intense fight, his breathing was not messed up at all. It was obvious that he was an assassin who lived in the dark. "Who are you?" she curiously asked. The other party blinked. He felt that he could not break free from Gong Dai's grasp and was afraid that Gong Dai would kill him, so he quickly spoke. I'm your older brother." His words stunned Gong Yimo. Older brother. Gong Dai was a little dissatisfied. This man wanted to get close to the royal sister? Thinking of this, he used more force. The other party cried out in pain. Let go, let go. I'm really your older brother. We have the same father but different mothers. Gong Yimo finally understood, you're my dead father's child. How terrifying. He actually has other women. The man in black was a little discouraged. My mother wasn't favored. I was born in the stables. Later on, when the country was invaded, I escaped. It's normal that you don't know of my existence, then why are you following me? Who sent you? Gong Yimo would not be bewitched by the other party's words. She already had a lot of brothers in Daiyu State. She was not interested in acknowledging another brother. The man in black was silent for a while. No one instigated me. I'm a member of the Snow Clan. Sometimes, I bring food to the Great Elder. Last night, the Great Elder told me that you had the complete map and wanted to come to the Holy Land of the Snow Clan. I was curious. When Gong Yimo heard this, she immediately determined that this person was lying. If he kept delivering food to the blind man, would the blind man let him follow even though he knew it was a trap? Gong Yimo's lips curled into an evil smile. Did the Great Elder tell you that the entrance to the treasure is fake? Gong Yimo was originally angry at him for lying and wanted to scare him. However, when he heard this, his breathing became unstable. He was really scared. Fake. His voice rose an octave. His eyes were wide open. Under the light of the torch, his eyes were so fierce that it looked like he wanted to eat someone. If it's fake, why did you come in? He asked loudly and fiercely. What Gong Yimo did not know was that after she left the blind man's place, this person went to the blind man's place. He saw the blind man covered in blood and looked like he had lost a battle. This person thought that the blind man had stopped them from finding the treasure and was subdued by Gong Dai and Gong Yimo. Therefore, he did not expect Gong Yimo to come in even though she knew that the entrance was fake. In the end, he got himself into trouble. Gong Yimo blinked and pouted. What's so scary about traps? Also, I thought that the person who followed us in was the mastermind. I didn't expect it to be a small fish like you. He did not look like a boss at all. The man in black was so angry that he laughed. The newborn calf was not afraid of the tiger. He had not been in for long, so he should be able to get out. Therefore, he made a prompt decision and said loudly, "Let me go. I want to get out. Do you know how dangerous this place is? You dare to come in through a fake passage?" Gong Yimo frowned. The fake passage is definitely not far from the real passage. What's wrong with coming in to find clues? You saw it too. We've been in here for so long, but nothing happened, right? The man in black was speechless. Finally, he sneered. Yes, you're right. We can find clues to the real entrance here, but you have to be alive to come in and leave. Let me go. Gong Yimo expected that he would not be able to escape from Gong Dai's hands. Therefore, she asked Gong Dai to let him go. Do you know why the sacred grounds are called sacred grounds? The man in black rubbed his hand that was hurting. His eyes stared at Gong Yimo. It made Gong Yimo feel a chill down her spine. Because there is a treasure that has existed for 100 years. Gong Yimo remembered that blind man said. The man in black was so angry that he was trembling. Yes. You still know that it is a treasure. It is a treasure that fell from the heavens 100 years ago. It is something like a huge black rock. It has many uses, but the most important one is to bewitch people's hearts. Bewitch people's hearts. Gong Yimo looked at Gong Dai. She suddenly thought of the black rock that old lady Shui gave her. It also had the ability to stimulate the nerves. He said that in the sacred grounds of the Snow Clan, there was a huge rock like that. That was a little dangerous. The so-called bewitching people's hearts was to stimulate their nerves and cause them to hallucinate, right? The more afraid something was, the more likely it would happen. That is a little dangerous. If this fake entrance has that rock you speak of. Gong Yimo frowned as she rubbed her chin. Alright, let's go out first. Actually, she felt that it was a pity. Originally she thought that although this fake entrance was fake, it was still dangerous. But the danger level was not that scary for people with high martial arts like them. Maybe they could even find some clues to the real entrance. But she did not expect that there would be such an accident. No wonder that blind man kept saying that it was a treasure but did not say what it was. It was on purpose. He wanted them to die here. Just a broken rock, he wanted them to die. Wasn't he too naive? But because of this man's words, they decided not to go forward. They decided to retreat first. Gong Yimo was originally in a relaxed mood. But the more they walked, the heavier her mood became. They had walked for a long time and this black tunnel seemed to have no end. They still had not reached the entrance. Gong Dai and the black-clothed man's expression was grave. Obviously they had also discovered this problem. Gong Yimo suddenly stopped walking. When she stopped, Gong Dai also stopped. Only that black-clothed man was so anxious that his forehead was sweating. Why did you stop walking? Gong Yimo ignored him and only said to Gong Dai. Smell me, do you smell the powder on my body? Chapter 540. Gong Ju sniffed the air and said with certainty, no. In other words, after walking for so long, they still hadn't reached the place where she had scattered the powder. Only the man in black had the fragrance. Then, were they going in circles? Gong Yimo's expression turned ugly. She had underestimated them. She knew that there was a trap, but she still wanted to check it out. It was because she didn't care about those people in the past. Now, it seemed that she had fallen into their trap. They had obviously fallen into an illusion. Because they were afraid that they couldn't get out, this tunnel would never end. Whatever they were afraid of, it would happen. I'm sorry. I was careless. Gong Yimo lowered her head and apologized to Gong Dai. Gong Dai didn't feel any pressure at all. Don't be afraid. I'm here. He didn't think that there would be a place that they couldn't get out of. His calmness made Gong Yimo calm down as well. That's right, what did they have to be afraid of? No matter how strange or powerful this place was, she had her space and Gong Dai. What was there to be afraid of? However, the man in black was anxious. Is this the time to apologize? Let's get out first. Gong Yimo wanted to calm him down, but when she looked over, something strange happened. In Gong Dai and Gong Yimo's eyes, that person actually disappeared with a look of horror. Gong Yimo rubbed her eyes to make sure that he had really disappeared. She panicked again. At this moment, Gong Dai held her hand tightly. Calm down, Chi in your dantian. Gong Yimo quickly retracted her mind and did as she was told. Gong Dai said at the right time, don't be afraid. He disappeared because we were no longer afraid of not being able to get out, so we left the illusion. However, because he was trapped in fear, he wasn't on the same level as us, so he disappeared. Gong Yimo narrowed her eyes and looked at him. That is to say, maybe from the moment we came in, we were already unconscious and fell into an illusion together. Gong Dai comforted her, if that's the case, I'm interested in that stone. It can unknowingly cause people to fall into unconsciousness and hallucinate. It's really a terrifying thing. Gong Yimo's expression was much more serious. We have to find a way to wake up first. Gong Dai nodded. There is a very direct way. What? Gong Dai pulled out his narrow sword and asked curiously, do you think people will die in an illusion? Gong Yimo lowered her head and pondered. I once read in a book that some mental patients would drown in their own illusions. In other words, people can kill themselves. Gong Dai's eyes suddenly flashed with a cold light. Then I would like to give it a try. Gong Yimo didn't understand what he meant, but the next second, Gong Yimo felt a sharp pain in her abdomen. He raised his head and looked at Gong Dai in disbelief. Gong Dai smiled deeply. Gong Yimo, it seems like you still haven't learned your lesson, what? He walked closer step by step and his appearance turned from dark to light. His attire changed from an ordinary black robe to the regent's court attire. The silver dragon embroidered on the black robe was vivid and lifelike. Every step he took seemed to be stepping on her heart. She was covered in blood and retreated backwards in horror. Gong Dai held his sword and closed in step by step. In the previous life, you were killed by this prince. In this life, you actually dared to come close to this prince. It seems like this prince's punishment on you wasn't deep enough, it wasn't painful enough, his clear black and white eyes were so cold. That chilling murderous intent was a nightmare that Gong Yimo would never forget. She couldn't help but think of Gong Dai's death row prison, that dark period of time. Every day was endless torture. No, you're not Gong Dai. Gong Dai won't hurt me. Her voice trembled. It sounded firm, but she didn't realize that she was panicking. Gong Dai gave a laugh. Foolish woman. This king will kill you once, so I'll kill you a second time. Kill you once, so I'll kill you a second time. This voice was like a nightmare that kept repeating in Gong Yimo's mind. Those beautiful scenes were like fireworks that shattered in her mind, turning into countless beautiful fragments that fell into the darkness. In the end, only Gong Dai's dark and cold eyes were left. Die. He smiled. That narrow sword viciously stabbed down towards her chest, but it was blocked by something. The expected pain did not appear. Gong Yimo looked down and saw that there was a glowing soft armor around her chest. This was the present that Gong Dai had given her for her 18th birthday. Her thoughts were a bit chaotic and those sealed memories seemed to suddenly appear. She clearly remembered that when she was 9 years old, Gong Dai had obediently massaged her back. She remembered that when she was 11 years old, she had sent him to the West Continent. At Shirley Pavilion, he had kowtowed to her 3 times. She remembered that when she was 13 years old, he had cut his flesh to feed her blood. She remembered that little Seven had secretly told her that the tube top-like soft armor she was wearing was made by Gong Dai after destroying a lot of natural silk. Gong Dai was afraid that she would be injured and afraid that she would feel restricted, so he made this kind of light soft armor that was specially made to protect her heart. Gong Yimo looked up at the person who wanted to kill her. He wasn't Gong Dai. As expected, when she looked up, that person kept retreating and disappeared into the darkness. Heaven and earth were destroyed and she was the only one left. The more she was afraid of something, the more it would appear. Was she afraid of being alone? Gong Yimo stood up and looked around in a daze. Her mind was in a daze and it seemed like someone was screaming. It was also like the sound of a mosquito flapping its wings. She was a little afraid. She had always been alone. She couldn't see the road ahead, only the present. A corpse fell beside his feet and the scene suddenly changed. She was covered in blood, some of it was other people's blood and some of it was her own. Looking up, there were corpses everywhere as far as the eye could see. The sun was setting and smoke was everywhere. The last person she had killed, this land. Finally, she was the only one left alive. Repressed, angry, afraid, aggrieved. She often had this dream in her previous life. She would kill people in the day and at night, she would dream that she had killed everyone. Then, she would be the only one left. Why? Gong Yimo suddenly knelt down in the sand and screamed. The faces of the people around her were very clear and not blurry like in the dream. Their deaths were extremely tragic. Their limbs were incomplete. Most of their faces were stained with blood and she couldn't see their faces clearly. However, Gong Yimo could see that they were very young. When the country was destroyed, home was no longer home. Even the youngest person had to go to war. And her hands. Gong Yimo knelt on the ground and looked at her hands that were full of blood. She had killed many children. She didn't want to do this. It was those greedy people who wanted to use the war to unify the world after they obtained the throne. She was only resisting this fate. However, if she didn't resist, would this war not affect the entire mainland? Chapter 541. If it wasn't for her, no matter how turbulent this continent was, it would still be peaceful. At least not so many people would die. Gong Yimo. Gong Yimo turned around and found Gong Che standing behind her. Brother Crown Prince, she knelt and walked towards him. She felt that in this world, everyone blamed her except the Crown Prince. After all, she did all these wrong things for the sake of the Crown Prince. Who knew that before she could get close, the Crown Prince's sword blocked her path? For me. He sneered, you did it for your own ambition. You refused to hand over the military power and said that you wanted to solve the war personally. These are all excuses for you to rule the world. You, Gong Yimo widened her eyes. Her gorgeous phoenix robe was stained with dust and her face became silent. She looked at Gong Che with heartache and felt that these were all excuses. These were excuses for Gong Che to not love her. She should have said, "You said it in such a dignified way because you want to remove me and let Su Miaolon take the throne." But at this moment, she looked at Gong Che's cold eyes and suddenly understood. He really thought that she was ambitious and wanted to take over the 4 countries and rule the world. Why didn't she see it in the beginning? Do you really think so? Gong Yimo suddenly asked coldly. You're afraid that I want to rule the world. But you're afraid of me, not because you don't like me. Gong Yimo's unreasonable words made Gong Che silent. Because she didn't remember this part, the Gong Che in this memory would not answer her. Gong Yimo lowered her head and saw that her skirt was stained with blood. Gong Che's suspicion was like a sharp arrow, making her feel so painful that she couldn't breathe. Big drops of tears fell from her eyes. Why are you suspecting me? Her voice was so soft that it was almost inaudible. I really just want everyone to calm down. I want to use violence to suppress violence and pacify the world. Did I do something wrong again? I didn't do it on purpose. A huge mistake has already been made. What's the use of whether it was intentional or not? Su Miaolon smiled as she handed over a cup of poisoned wine. No one in this world will understand you, not even your husband. You are destined to be alone. This is your destiny. Su Miaolon smiled as she handed over a cup of poisoned wine. She smiled like a flower. It must be very tiring, right? No one acknowledged you, no one trusted you, you were condemned by everyone, you were cursed by the world, but you're dead. Your sins will be redeemed. Gong Yimo looked at the wine cup that suddenly appeared in her hand. It reflected her aged appearance when she was 30 years old. Damn you! You are the one who brought the weapons of evil into the world and incited the evil thoughts of the people. Damn you! You've killed so many people. Those people should be living well. Even your lover suspects that you have ulterior motives. What's the point of you not dying? I'm really tired. Gong Yimo clenched the wine cup. She really wanted to die. Royal sister. Gong Yimo paused. She turned around and saw Gong Ju, who was only 6 years old, standing there with a thin and pale face. Royal sister, don't leave me. Gong Yimo was shocked. Little Gong Dai approached step by step. With every step he took, he grew a little. When he reached her, he had already turned into a 17-year-old. Royal sister, you still have me. The wine cup suddenly shattered. Gong Yimo had a headache. The environment around her changed again. Birds sang and flowers bloomed. Time was peaceful. Chu Xingfeng was packing her luggage. His slow movements clearly showed his unwillingness. Isn't it good to stay on Mount Yunding? He was already in his 20s. But because of his tender appearance, he pouted like a teenager. Don't go down the mountain, okay? Gong Yimo suddenly wanted to cry. She wanted to tell him, okay. I won't go down the mountain. I'll stay on Mount Yunding with you forever. It was too scary to go down the mountain. She didn't want to meet people she shouldn't meet. Do things she shouldn't do. Make the world miserable and turn upside down. She, as a girl, really couldn't bear it, but she couldn't control herself. She couldn't even control her expression of joy and yearning. I want to go down the mountain. It's too boring on the mountain. Don't worry, I'll come back. I'll bring you a gift. No. I don't want to go down the mountain. I won't go. I won't go. Qiu Xingfeng. Gong Yimo looked at Qiu Xingfeng. She desperately wanted to grab his hand. But his white clothes fluttered like a dream that she couldn't catch. Then his white clothes were stained with blood. He fell into her arms. The last man who would treat her so well was dead. Ah! Gong Yimo screamed in pain. The snow on Mount Yunding turned red. The flowers withered and the birds flew away. The whole world was dark red. Why? Why did you do this to me? I can't accept it. I can't accept it. I didn't do anything wrong. Those people's greed wasn't my fault. I've already redeemed myself by pacifying the 4 countries. Why did you let the most important people die in front of me? Why? Gong Dai hugged Gong Yimo tightly. Her little face was pale and cold sweat flowed down. She looked like she was in pain. What exactly did she dream of? At this moment, the man in black lit a fire and said angrily, "It's no use. You can only walk out of this illusion by yourself. You can't wake her up." Gong Dai suddenly looked at him and smiled coldly. "Then how did you walk out?" His voice was full of murderous intent. The man in black didn't back down and said, "I came out the same way you came out." He pointed at the tunnel behind him. "This tunnel can create illusions. It's good news. It proves that we didn't come to a fake entrance. We came to the main entrance of the treasure." He said softly, "It said that the main entrance of the treasure isn't hidden. So they set up many checkpoints along the way. Just like this tunnel, when it was being built, the people of the sacred lands used medicine to confuse people's consciousness. That's how it achieved this effect. Even grass doesn't grow inside. When people walk in, they will fall into a coma. In addition, the treasure that fell from the sky will disturb this area. The more people are afraid of something, the more they will dream of it. If they die in the dream, they will die too." The man in black stared at Gong Yimo with a smile on his face. "You and I can walk through because we have no fear. But she seems to have a lot of fear in her heart. But her willpower is very strong. I've seen people fall into this trap and die very quickly. She has been unconscious for more than 2 hours, but she's still fighting the dream. She has a strong will, but I don't know what those fears are." Gong Dai hugged Gong Yimo tightly. He looked at Gong Yimo's face and whispered in her ear. "Royal sister, don't leave me, you still have me." But at this moment, he suddenly noticed that Gong Yimo's mouth was bleeding. This phenomenon made Gong Dai panic. Chapter 542. He pulled out his sword and pointed it at the man in black. "I don't care what method you use. Wake her up." The man in black was shocked. He wanted to step back but was stopped by Gong Dai's murderous aura. Cold sweat condensed bit by bit, but he still had a stiff smile on his face. "No. I can't do anything." His Adam's apple moved, and he swallowed. "She can only rely on herself. She is the famous princess of Gu country. This illusion can't trap her." Gong Emo suddenly groaned. Surprised, Gong Ju quickly looked at her, only to see that she was sweating more and more. Her face was pale as if she would die at any time. He remembered that Gong Emo shouted for him not to kill her. Why would the royal sister dream that he wanted to kill her? It was impossible. Gong Yimo crawled forward in the bloody ground. Qiu Xingfeng, who was in her arms, suddenly woke up and stabbed her with his sword, almost killing her. Then he chased after her crazily as if he didn't know her. "Gong Yimo, you killed my disciple and my master. I want you to pay with your life." His eyes were red. Every time the sword stabbed her, it would leave a scar on her body, and every time it would hurt her to the core. There were several times when Gong Yimo wanted to just die like this. But there seemed to be a vague voice in her heart, telling her to crawl forward in an attempt to escape. "I want to live. I want to live. I have to live." But there was a cliff in front of her, and there was no way to escape. She turned around, and Qiu Xingfeng sneered, and directly pierced her abdomen with his sword. He nailed her to the ground. His face seemed to be covered with fog, and she couldn't see his face clearly. No one wants you to live, and the whole world wants you to die. No, Gong Yimo narrowed her eyes, and blood kept gushing out. She felt that she couldn't breathe, and her body gradually became stiff and numb. I want to live, why? Why did she want to live even though she was tired and felt that there was no meaning in living? At this moment, she suddenly felt a kind of warmth enveloping her. She suddenly felt that she could breathe, and her limbs and bones were no longer so stiff. Because I want you to live. A voice seemed to come from the horizon, but it directly exploded in her ears. She opened her eyes, but she didn't see anything. We're not married yet. That's right, she still wanted to get married, but with whom? We also want to have cute children. She wanted to bear a child for someone. That person said that he wanted a boy and a girl. The boy would protect her with him, and the girl would pamper her as if she was pampering her. That person, who was it? When she opened her eyes again, she saw a person wearing a black brocade robe suddenly appear in front of her. She couldn't see his face clearly, but he used his back to block Qiu Xingfeng's attack. Be careful. She shouted subconsciously. Don't be afraid. That person's face gradually became clear. He was really good-looking. Like the most beautiful page in a magnificent book, or like the snow that had just melted, and the sunlight shining on the snowflakes, cold and gentle. He lowered his head, and a soft kiss landed on her lips. And behind him, Qiu Xingfeng's sword also fiercely stabbed down. It's all fake. Their lips touched, and his voice was like a dream, but it made Gong Yimo's heart suddenly jump. He held her hand, and slowly pressed it against his chest. I'm real. Gong Dai. Gong Yimo softly exclaimed, and suddenly opened her eyes. She saw that Gong Dai was really kissing her. Seeing that she woke up, he didn't leave. Instead, he deepened the kiss. Gong Yimo was hugged tightly by him, and kissed so fiercely that she couldn't breathe. God knew, when Gong Dai found that her body was cold, and her breathing was gradually stopping, how scared he was. What kind of fear would make people wish they were dead? She still had him. Why should she be scared? When the kiss ended, Gong Dai stared at her sternly. Gong Yimo subconsciously shrank her neck. At this moment, her limbs gradually regained their strength, but she was as obedient as a quail in his arms. Gong Yimo, what are you scared of? Gong Yimo's lips moved. She wanted to say something, but she didn't know where to start. I don't care what you're scared of. Gong Dai loudly and sternly told her. If you encounter something like this in the future, just think of one thing in your heart. That is to believe in me. No matter what, even if I die, I won't hurt you. Also, as long as I'm alive, no one can hurt you. Not people, not even gods or demons. Gong Yimo was stunned by his roar, but the uneasiness in her heart seemed to disappear instantly. She rubbed in his arms, and said with a little grievance. I'm sorry, she didn't mean to doubt him. She clearly said that she wanted to forget. At this moment, a voice abruptly interrupted. Heh, little lass, I'm very curious about what you dreamed of. Why did it seem like there were many people who wanted to kill you in your dream? Gong Dai stared at him. Do you want me to cripple your other hand as well? That person rubbed his nose in annoyance, and hid to one side. Gong Yimo curiously blinked her eyes. She didn't expect this person to be real. Moreover, he was the same as Gong Dai, undisturbed. You're really my brother. The firelight reflected on that person's face, his smile didn't diminish at all, guaranteed to be genuine. Gong Yimo took a look at the surroundings. This place was like a courtyard, surrounded by tall mountains, and there were many trees around. It was obvious that no one had set foot here for many years. We're in. That person immediately hung his head dejectedly. That's right, we're in. Because the exit has collapsed, someone wants to trap us here. Looks like it was all that blind man's doing. Gong Yimo gritted her teeth. Tell me the truth. You must be someone who's eyeing the treasure, otherwise blind man wouldn't want you to be trapped here. What's your motive? Who sent you here? He seemed to be aggrieved, and after some time, he spoke in a low voice. I'm not here to snatch the treasure from you. He frowned, and his voice became even lower. Legend has it that the people in the sacred lands used the treasure to develop a medicine that could clear one's mind. I want that. Gong Yimo didn't take his words to heart at first, but who knew that the other party spoke in a low voice again. My mother, because she had been tortured for a long time, she went mad. I heard that the medicine can restore one's sanity. Gong Yimo originally wanted to laugh, but she suddenly thought of something and asked anxiously. Restore her sanity? What do you mean? That man licked his lips. Someone once saw it. A natural-born retard in the sacred lands was cured. So that medicine will definitely be useful for my mother. Gong Yimo's hand suddenly grabbed onto Gong Dai's clothes tightly. Really? He nodded his head vigorously. The Snow Clan's treasure isn't gold, silver, or jewelry, but they used the treasure that fell from the sky 100 years ago to develop many useful things. It's just one of the medicines that can clear one's mind. Chapter 543. At this moment, Gong Dai hugged Gong Yimo and said softly, now that we can't get out, we can only go forward. Since the meteorite can affect this place, it means that the treasure is not far away. This man guessed that this entrance is the main entrance of the treasure, with many checkpoints, to prevent people from spying on the treasure. And that blind elder of the Snow Clan concluded that we will die here, so he did not stop us from coming in. After hearing Gong Dai's words, Gong Yimo could not help but ask the man in black, what is in the sacred land? Why do so many people want to come in? The man in black pondered for a moment. There are many good things. For example, there is a medicine that prevents one from aging, or a poison that can make one go crazy. It can stimulate one's potential, but it can also make one lose their rationality. Gong Yimo thought of that crazy woman. Poison. It's something from the treasure. That was clearly a failed stimulant. The medicine that Empress Dowager Yuqi concocted to make people go crazy was more advanced. Although there were after effects, at least the person would still have some rationality. Of course, the effect of madness was not as good as the poison. The man in black smiled strangely. The poison can make people lose their rationality, but it can increase one's combat power by 3 times. So what? After being poisoned by the poison, no matter how strong one's combat power is, it is still a double-edged sword. What if it can be controlled? The man in black's voice echoed in the sky well. Do you know what the holy stone that fell from the sky is called? Gong Yimo was stared at by his cold eyes and asked subconsciously, what? Sound transmission stone. He said with a strange expression. The formation of the poison is closely related to the sound transmission stone. If someone is poisoned and has a sound transmission stone, guess what the consequences will be? Gong Yimo narrowed her eyes. He shrugged. Anyway, I don't know the details. After all, I don't have this thing. Gong Yimo was shocked. She suddenly remembered that the blind man had said that after his mother married the Snow King, she was bewitched by him and stole something from the sacred land. And that thing made the Snow Clan's king so greedy that he wanted to kill the Daiyu state's monarch. Could it be this? A voodoo that could drive people crazy? Gong Yimo felt that this thing might not be that simple. Moreover, this person knew it so clearly. Who would believe that there was no ghost? Hey, what's your name? That person smiled. The smile on the corner of his mouth seemed to have been measured. My name is Snow. You can call me Big Brother. At noon the next day, Gong Dai and the others had already passed through several mountains. This treasure was in the heart of hopeless forest, surrounded by countless mountains and trees, and the treasure was in the middle of these mountains. Gong Yimo was depressed. She just wanted to get a snow Ganoderma. As for that man, with Gong Dai around, she was not worried at all. Although the other party's background was unknown and untrustworthy, it was better for him to be alive. Perhaps he would be useful. Why aren't they here yet? Gong Yimo was going crazy. Although the traps along the way couldn't hurt them, it was very troublesome to deal with them. Wasn't it just a small treasure trove of a small country? They hid it too well. Gong Dai gestured for her to calm down. At this moment, they were at the bottom of a mountain, and suddenly they smelled a strange smell. Gong Yimo walked to the end of the tunnel and looked, and instantly her scalp went numb. There was no road in front of them, only a big pit. And there were countless snakes entangled in it. There were so many of them, and they were so big. Were all the poisonous snakes in the entire hopeless forest gathered here? In front of them, there was a stone platform, and behind the stone platform was a stone door. It was very big, and it looked like it hadn't been opened for a long time. But how were they going to pass through the snake pit in front of them and reach the other side? Gong Dai looked for a while. For such a long distance, there must be 2 footholds to cross. Not to mention the snakes in the pit, there were also snakes on the walls. Moreover, there was a strange mucus on the walls, and it looked very slippery. There was definitely no way for people to step on it. How are we going to cross? Gong Yimo subconsciously looked at Gong Dai. Why don't we burn it? At this moment, the black-clothed man Shuesei suddenly said, we can't make too much noise. If we forcefully attack, this place will collapse. This is also one of their methods to prevent others from entering. Then what should we do? Gong Yimo felt that this person seemed to be worth a lot. Use your blood. Shuesei looked at Gong Yimo's white neck. If this tunnel is really the main entrance of the treasure, and these restrictions are used to prevent outsiders, then your blood must be the key. Gong Yimo felt that it wasn't so simple. If my blood is so useful, that blind man wouldn't let us in so easily. Won't you know once you try? Shuesei urged her. Gong Yimo glanced at Gong Dai, and Gong Dai killed the snake that was pouncing towards them with a sword. He nodded, he would watch this man. Gong Yimo bit her finger and dripped her blood. It was as if they had met a plague. All the snakes frantically dodged to the sides. It was really effective. Gong Yimo gave Shuesei a kick. You go down first. Shuesei felt wronged. I am your brother. Although he said that, he still quickly walked forward. Gong Dai looked at the sticky liquid on the ground and frowned. He carried Gong Yimo in his arms and walked forward. There were snakes on both sides, but when the snakes smelled the blood on Gong Yimo's body, they automatically dodged away. So it was very easy for them to walk through the snake basin. Gong Yimo couldn't help but touch Gong Dai's face. Gong Dai, you didn't sleep well last night, right? Last night Gong Dai and Shuesei were on guard duty and didn't sleep for long. I'm fine. Even in such a cold and damp place, the smell on his body was still clean and refreshing. After we get the snow Lingji, we will go home. Home, this word was really beautiful. After experiencing that heart-shaking illusion, when she woke up and her soul was still unstable, the words that Gong Dai said to her were like a brand, heavily engraved in her heart. It made her rely on Gong Dai even more. Shuesei, who was walking in front, said angrily, "Can't we go out first before flirting with each other? Why don't you take a look at where this place is?" The surrounding snakes didn't dare to get close, but they stared at them and kept flicking out their tongues. To think that they still had the mood to flirt. When Gong Yimo heard that, she was not convinced as she hugged Gong Dai and kissed him. She even purposely made a very loud sound. None of your business. Shuese was speechless and couldn't be bothered with her. He took the lead and walked to the front of the stone door. This stone door was very big. Shuese and Gong Dai both used all their strength before they managed to push the door open. A long buzzing sound came out as if a place that had been asleep for many years had been opened. The light from the fire illuminated this space which had been sealed for a long time. In front of them was a pharmacy and there were quite a number of medicines in the room. Gong Yimo's eyes lit up. She wondered if the medicine that Shuese mentioned which could clear one's mind was here. She immediately said, "Quickly look around, is there that medicine that you mentioned?" Chapter 544. Medicine. Snow squinted his eyes as he sized her up, "So this is the reason why you brought me along. You've made Big Brother so sad." Gong Yimo glared at him and he hurriedly went to look for the medicine obediently, but in the end he returned empty-handed. "No, this is perhaps the outermost small pharmacy. How could the good stuff be placed here?" Gong Yimo touched her chin. "You said that we're at the outermost part of the treasure deposit. Don't tell me that after going through so many checkpoints, we still haven't entered the treasure deposit." "Rubbish." He rolled his eyes. "If it's that easy to enter, that stinky blind man wouldn't have lied to us to come here. It'll only be more dangerous in front, so you guys better be careful." Saying that, he took the lead and walked into the next tunnel. Gong Yimo gave Gong Dai a look and Gong Dai followed behind, blocking the other party's line of sight so that Gong Yimo had time to keep all the medicine in the house. Gong Yimo felt that Snow's words might not be trustworthy. He said that the most valuable thing in this treasure deposit was the medicine, then how could the medicine placed behind such a huge and heavy stone door be ordinary? Perhaps this was specially placed outside to let those outsiders who barged into the forbidden grounds to return after getting some benefit, so these medicine must be good stuff. Just that she didn't know if it had passed its expiry date after being placed for so long. After Gong Yimo kept the medicine, she followed behind while Gong Dai waited for her at the front. Not long after, they came across an even bigger door. This door was extremely strange as it was entirely black. It looked even heavier than the previous door. Gong Dai had tried before but he couldn't use brute force to push it open. Seeing that Gong Yimo had arrived, Snow didn't ask her what she had done earlier but directly said to her, "Do you see that groove? Drip your blood into it and it'll be done. In this world, only your blood can open this door." Gong Yimo didn't have the mood to ask him how he knew so clearly. She raised her head and saw that the groove he was talking about was at the base of a ferocious beast's tongue. If he didn't tell her, she really wouldn't know that place where she could drip her blood into. Gong Yimo bit her finger and placed it in the stone beast's mouth. Inexplicably, she felt a suction force. This stone beast was sucking her blood. Just as she was about to take her hand out, the stone beast's mouth suddenly closed. Gong Yimo instantly felt her wrist being bitten by the stone teeth. Blood flowed out quickly. When Gong Dai saw this, he immediately wanted to smash the stone beast's head. However, Gong Yimo stopped him. "Look, her blood seemed to have been mixed with something else and turned into a fluorescent red." Then, a red fluorescent blood column began to spread from the stone beast's head to its limbs, as if it had been injected with blood. Gong Yimo gritted her teeth and held on, controlling her blood output. However, the process was too long. When Gong Dai could not help but break the greedy stone beast's head, they heard a heavy thud. The door opened. The stone beast's mouth slowly opened, and Gong Dai hurriedly bandaged the wound on her wrist. "Are you okay?" he asked anxiously. After losing so much blood, Gong Yimo did not feel the heartache. However, Gong Dai's heart ached to death. He was even thinking, was it really only royal sister's blood that would work? His black eyes that were filled with killing intent landed on Snow. If there was a next time, he would use this person's blood to test it out. The group of them walked in once again. This time, Gong Yimo could feel that they had stepped into the territory of a wild beast. That feeling of rejection was very obvious. Obviously, if they had been wandering around the treasure trove previously, then this time, they had entered the outermost layer of the treasure trove. Behind the stone door, there were many pools. Inside, there was a bubbling sound, as if there was a viscous liquid boiling. Gong Yimo guessed that there might be geothermal energy underneath the pools. That was why the 8 pools were boiling. As for the liquid in the pools, no one knew what it was. However, they did not have any intention to investigate. Gong Yimo took advantage of the time when Snow was not paying attention and kept half of the thick and heavy stone door into her space. Her thinking was very simple. Opening this door required so much blood from her. If they were unable to advance and could only retreat later, with this door blocking their way, wouldn't it cost them their lives? Snow did not seem to notice that half of the stone door was gone. He had a fanatical look as he moved forward, not caring about them behind him. Following that, they went through many mechanisms. This time, even Gong Yimo could not help but praise the wisdom of these people from the sacred lands. Originally, she did not place these mechanisms in her eyes. But after they had all suffered some injuries, they knew how powerful the ancient people were. However, it was obviously impossible to trap them here like this. They didn't know what was waiting for them after this. Underground, they did not know if it was night or day. Finally, after going through countless mechanisms, they came to a stone room. There was only one medicine bottle in the stone room. Snow's eyes lit up and wanted to snatch it away. But Gong Dai was one step ahead and took the jade bottle in his hand. "What is this?" Gong Dai asked coldly. Snow's eyes flashed past a sliver of danger. But the smile was still carved on his face as he grinned and said, "This is the mind-refreshing pill that I want. The snow Ganoderma that you want will be found very soon. Return this to me." Gong Yimo walked forward and opened the medicine bottle to take a sniff. "Are you sure?" Why did she only smell blood the moment she opened it? Was this medicine really able to make a person's mind clear? Snow remained calm and unruffled as he said, "Of course it is. Why would I lie to you? If you want to get the snow Ganoderma, you cannot do without my help. Why is there a need to fall out with me here?" Gong Yimo suddenly said, "You're lying, right?" She twirled the medicine bottle in her hand. "There is a goo poison in the treasure, and the goo poison will make people lose their rationality, turning them into killing machines. But if the goo poison did not have any benefits, they would not have kept it to harm the world. That is to say, going crazy might just be a side effect of the goo poison." Gong Yimo's words made Snow's gaze not look at the bottle in her hand, but at her. "Your conjecture is very interesting. Continue." Gong Yimo leaned on Gong Dai and said softly, "If the above conjecture is true, they would definitely want to develop a medicine that can clear one's mind to counter this side effect. But they must have failed. Because if they succeeded, they would not have kept the goo poison hidden. So you're lying to me. There is no such medicine here." Saying so, she frowned slightly and said with some disappointment, "You're using this to lie to me because you know that I want to use the medicine that can clear one's mind to help a person. You know that I treat Mount Yunding differently, and Mount Yunding has always been mysterious. Thinking about it, only Xue Wuxi would tell you this. So, even if you're my brother, you're not as harmless as you appear. Perhaps, you're the one who wants to control me." Snow was stunned at first, then he laughed loudly. Chapter 545. I have to say that younger sister, your imagination is really rich. His refined smiling face flashed a trace of gloominess, but I feel that we are still in a cooperative relationship. You want the snow Ganoderma and I want the goo poison. Our objectives are different, so why not help each other? Gong Dai protected Gong Yimo behind him. You want to hurt her, so you are an enemy. Gong Dai had always been on guard against this man, and now seeing that royal sister had laid her cards on the table with him, he also did not want to endure any longer. The narrow sword in his hand drew out, and that pair of black and white eyes coldly landed on the other party's body. His killing intent almost materialized. Don't. Snow saw that Gong Dai was serious and hurriedly waved his hands. Without me, you will definitely not be able to get the treasure. This place is a place of no return, and it was that stinky blind man who intentionally deceived you all into coming in. Although he had also harmed me, but at least we have walked to this point together. Shouldn't we continue to help each other? Internal strife will only lead to death. Saying that, he looked at the jade bottle in Gong Yimo's hand with some regret. That thing you all want, then take it. I won't snatch it, alright? Gong Dai glanced at Gong Yimo. He had always respected royal sister's way of thinking. Gong Yimo looked at the other party in a scrutinizing manner. If you want to continue to cooperate, then I can ask you a few questions. You must answer truthfully. Definitely, ask away. Snow's face was always smiling, and that smile seemed to have never changed. Back then the Snow clan forced a piece of black stone into my hands. What was their motive? Snow narrowed his eyes. You're talking about that stone, ah? Haha, you've really misunderstood old madam. She had good intentions, ah? Good intentions? Gong Yimo sneered. That stone has an effect on me. Snow nodded his head. There will be a little effect, but once you get used to it, it will be fine. But, if you had always carried that stone with you, previously you wouldn't have taken so long to get through the illusion. After he finished speaking, he pulled out a rope from around his neck. On the rope was the same black stone. He said to Gong Dai a little embarrassedly, "You're not bad. You have a strong will, so you were able to break through in one go. But I can't. But I have a treasure. As long as I have this stone, the forbidden land of illusion in the treasure trove will be useless to me." Gong Yimo frowned. She couldn't tell if the other party was telling the truth, so she asked another question. "You said you came for the goo poison." She said calmly, "Then you must know why the goo poison was first developed. What was its original purpose?" Gong Yimo's questions made Shuese ponder for a moment. He smiled and said softly, "Goo poison, it's not really a poison. It used to be called goo sacrifice. Snow Country is proficient in the art of goo. After the treasure fell from the sky, the people of the Holy Land were very curious about it. In the end, they found that the black stone could be eaten after it was ground into powder." He smiled lightly. "But after people ate it, they would fall into a dream for life and sleep forever. But, people who fall into a deep sleep, not only don't need to eat, they won't grow old. When they die, their appearance will still be the same as when they took it." Gong Yimo's pupils contracted. "Won't grow old?" Shuese nodded. "The goo poison appeared in the beginning because they wanted to not grow old. They had failed many times. Later, they found out by chance that the black stone powder could be eaten by the goo. Then people would eat the goo or eat the powder ground from the goo. Then they wouldn't fall into a deep sleep and would be able to retain their youth. So there are two types of goo poison. The first type is when the goo enters the body alive. Then they can use a sound goo that can let out a low cry to control the time when the goo poison in the body explodes. Just like the kind that Wuxi ate. After the goo poison entered the body, once it heard the sound of the sound goo, it would explode in the body. At that time, the goo poison would spread to the four limbs. This goo poison didn't have a mother and child goo. Once it exploded, it would die. So it couldn't be controlled by the sound goo. This was also why Dong Wani could make Xue Wuxi go crazy but couldn't control her. As for the other type, Xue said with a smile, the other type is a little purer. It directly grinds the goo poison into powder. Once it's eaten, it will explode. Gong Yimo suddenly thought of that crazy woman Xue Wuxi and said in a low voice, after a person consumes it, they won't grow old. But they will go crazy uncontrollably. Then isn't this a failed product? Xue smiled faintly, not necessarily. He pinched the stone around his neck, because the main component of the goo poison is this stone that can interfere with people's hearts. So when a person goes crazy, it's not impossible to control. Gong Yimo was suddenly shocked. If a person could be controlled by another person after going crazy, wouldn't that person become another person's killing machine? This person's motive was indeed not pure. You want to obtain the goo poison and control others. Then you want to use the goo poison on me to control me, to open the treasure for you. Gong Yimo saw that he was still smiling, but that smile made her feel cold. No, what you gave Xue Wuxi was a live goo poison. That means you want me to be poisoned, but you also want to delay the time when it will flare up. There's only one explanation. That is, you haven't found a way to control me. And this method might be in this treasure. So that day, if Dong Wani had really joined hands with Wu Shi and Qiu Zhongchan to make Gong Yimo eat the goo, then Dong Wani would also die. Because Xue wanted to poison Gong Yimo, but he didn't want Gong Yimo to flare up at that time. Gong Yimo slowly pulled out her sword. This person had ulterior motives and had tried to scheme against her several times. It's better to just kill him right here. Xue was still smiling. There is a medicine that can restore a person's consciousness, he suddenly said. Back then, the king suddenly killed the people from the Holy Lands because they had developed this medicine. The king only needed beasts that he could control, he didn't need any elixirs. Wouldn't that be useless? Only I can bring you to find this medicine, he said resolutely. There's only one of this medicine in the world and only I know about it. So, do you still want to kill me? Who are you? Gong Yimo stared at him closely. Xue laughed softly, I'm your brother, don't worry, your martial arts are strong and you have helpers. What can I do under your nose? Look at what you've asked, I've answered honestly. You're not poisoned, what's there to be afraid of? Let's continue walking. If we don't hurry, we might starve to death here. He was right. Even if he found a way to control the goo poison here, she wasn't poisoned. What was there to be afraid of? And she really wanted that medicine. If she could give it to Qiu Xingfeng, it would be a form of compensation. So she kept her sword, but kept her guard up against the other party. The group continued to move forward, and the atmosphere became more serious. Chapter 546. Gong Ju held Gong Yimo's hand and disagreed with her approach. At first glance, he could tell that Snow was a scheming person who was impossible to guard against. As far as he knew, Royal Sister only knew one idiot, and that was Qiu Xingfeng. Even though Qiu Xingfeng had helped his sister before, he was very unhappy that she took such a risk for him. She was asking a tiger for its skin. Gong Yimo was thinking about something, but when she saw Gong Dai's serious face, she knew the reason. She couldn't help but pull his clothes. Gong Dai glanced at her with dissatisfaction in his cold eyes. Gong Yimo lowered her head. Well, Qiu Xingfeng was kind to me. I just wanted to repay him. Gong Dai stared at the snow in front of them, but you shouldn't put yourself in danger. In his opinion, snow was an uncertain factor. The longer he stayed, the more dangerous it would be. He held the sword in his hand. He wanted to kill him several times. Gong Yimo quickly held Gong Dai's hand and said shamefully, "Please bear with it. I know what I'm doing. I won't let him go out alive." She stared at the snow. She didn't expect the person behind the scenes to be so young. Moreover, she always felt that it was a little strange. This person had schemed against her time and time again, but he still dared to appear in front of her openly and speak of those schemes. Was he really fearless? They were surrounded by danger several times. They didn't know how many levels they had passed. Gong Yimo felt exhausted. On the other hand, Gong Dai kept protecting her because he practiced hard. During this time, they needed Gong Yimo's blood to open the way. Gong Dai didn't want to use his blood to test it. He also forced Snow to test it with his blood, but it didn't work. No wonder Snow said that only Gong Yimo could enter here. Another door appeared in front of them. It should have been a night, so they were tired. But after seeing the door, Snow was refreshed. "Quick! Open it. Once you open it, you'll find the treasure." There was nothing special about this door. There was a huge lotus flower on it. The flower petals and stamens were carved vividly, as if they had just bloomed. "I can open it, but I have a lot of questions that I want to ask you." Gong Yimo's words made Snow impatient. The treasure was right in front of her, who was going to answer her question. However, he was very clear that this door was made of snow iron and was indestructible. Gong Yimo's blood was the only key, so he suppressed the murderous glint in his eyes and said patiently, "Ask away." Gong Yimo pressed her hand on the door. "Once, I saw the remains of a very cruel sacrificial ceremony in Snow Country under a ruined temple. It implied that they wanted to summon evil spirits and destroy the country and the world. Last time, Shue Wuxi said that I should be the one to destroy the world. So, how do you explain that?" Snow laughed. "How can we believe such nonsense? Wu Qi must have gone crazy because of the poison. Quickly open the door." He was very anxious as his eyes fell on Gong Yimo, as if he couldn't wait to cut her neck to open the way for him. Gong Yimo's lips curled into a smile. "I naturally also feel that it is nonsense, but the reason? Why do so many people from Snow Country believe in this matter?" Seeing that he didn't answer, Gong Yimo wouldn't open the door. Snow sighed, showing a helpless look. "Little ass, why do you like to get to the bottom of this matter? Tell me." Gong Yimo's face was firm. This person, if she didn't force him, he would definitely not tell her the truth. And all these, she wanted to know. Seeing that Gong Yimo had made up her mind, Snow finally sighed. All right, I'll tell you everything." He smiled, but there was an indescribable glint in his eyes as he talked about a seemingly unrelated matter. "Do you know why your mother was so resolute in marrying the king?" He gave a strange smile. "Because although she was the holy maiden of the sacred lands, second only to one person. But her father's treatment towards her can't be considered good." Snow looked at the huge lotus on the stone door in front of him and said faintly, "Where do you think the mind-refreshing pill came from?" "It was the holy elder of the sacred lands who tested it on your mother. In front of others, she was the high and mighty holy maiden, but behind others, she was merely a medicine man. She had been taking stone powder since young, and in order to prevent her from falling into a deep sleep, her father used all sorts of methods to keep her awake. The pain is something that you can't imagine." His tone seemed to be regretful, but more of it was a kind of ridicule. "I don't know if it was because she had taken too much stone powder, but there seemed to be a link between your mother and that sacred stone. Back then when your mother stole the goo poison and gave it to the king, Holy Elder originally wanted to kill her. But in the end, he didn't and instead agreed to let her marry the king, because your mother was pregnant. And on the first day she was pregnant, Holy Elder already knew about it. Because in that huge sacred stone in the sacred lands, a piece of red stone heart suddenly appeared. Snow's words made Gong Yimo's hair stand on end. At this moment, he looked at Gong Yimo with a smile. So you were born different. From the first day you appeared, you were given a legend. So after Snow Country was destroyed, many people believed that you would take revenge for Snow Country. They believed that the sacred stone was the original body of the evil god and that you were the reincarnation of the evil god. They hated the Dayu state and hated the world, so they hoped that you would destroy the world. Saying this, Snow laughed out loud. Of course, I don't believe in all these. Alright, I've said all I know. Now, can you open this door for me? Gong Yimo lowered her head and stood behind Gong Dai. If what you said is true, that my mother had been taking stone powder all year round, then in my body, there should be some of that stone's components, right? Snow was suddenly stunned. Just now you said that the stone in your hand has another name. It's called the voice transmission stone. Back then, old Madame Xue gave me that piece of sacred stone to test me. In the end, she found out that because of the stone powder in my body, the sacred stone could affect me, but the effect was very limited. So, can I guess that you came this time to get that piece of red stone heart? Maybe only the stone heart can really control the poison and control me. You indeed don't want to destroy the world, but you made use of those Snow Clan people who want to revive their country to help you control me. With my influence on the 4 countries now, as long as you control me, you can achieve many goals, such as dominating the Central Plains. The moment she finished speaking, Gong Dai's sword directly pierced towards Snow. Snow quickly dodged, but his face was still cut by Gong Dai's sword. Gong Dai had long felt that his face was strange, but who knew that there was no blood after it was cut open? A piece of skin was pulled over his face, setting off the unchanging smile on his face. There was a kind of strangeness that made one's heart tremble. Snow touched his face and said regretfully, I really like this human skin mask. You guys are too much. Chapter 547. Gong Yimo was watching coldly by the side. If it was based on martial strength, she felt that Shuesei was not Gong Dai's opponent, but she was worried that the other party would play tricks, so she was waiting by the side. Who exactly are you? Why do you know so much? It was absolutely impossible for him to be her half-brother. Those who knew the secret of the sacred lands were all dead. Only Blind survived. Snow Clan's king and Shuel Yen were both dead. Then who told him all these? Shuesei gave a light laugh. Want to know? He suddenly took out a jade bottle and poured a blood-red pill into his mouth. In that instant, a trace of blood appeared in his eyes. That pill in his hand was a goo poison. Originally I didn't want to use force, but you are so smart. I just said a little and you are able to guess everything. Really making people headache. His voice became gloomier. Since that is the case, I can only kill Gong Dai. Then I will capture you alive. She could feel his inner strength rising continuously. Gong Yimo was alarmed. Her mind suddenly flashed a possibility. He said that the goo poison's antidote had been developed. Then was it possible that he had taken the antidote before? So the side effects of the goo poison could be controlled by him. As expected, Shuesei's strength suddenly rose sharply. But he was not like Xue Wuxi, who did not recognize his own family. Instead he consciously attacked Gong Dai. And in the process of attacking, his strength was still rising. Gong Yimo immediately joined the battle. Originally Shuesei's strength was below Gong Dai, but after taking this medicine, he actually had a tendency to surpass her. If this carried on, it would be extremely disadvantageous for them. The 3 of them fought in a chaotic battle, but all 3 of them were absolute experts. Once they fought, the commotion was not small. Originally I didn't want to do this. What if I hurt you? Wait till I get the stone heart, then you will be the puppet that I want the most. Shuasei's strength continued to rise, but he still had his rationality and could still speak clearly. Gong Yimo had decided to waste time with him. His strength rose greatly because of the goo poison's berserk effect. He also had his rationality because he had taken the antidote before. Blood could detoxify the poison. Then in the process of detoxifying his body, he would be in a berserk state. As long as he could stall for time, everything would be fine. Once the poison was mixed with the snow-colored blood, his battle prowess would return to how it was before, and there would be nothing to fear. But Snow, who had taken medicine, was actually able to fight Gong Yimo and Gong Dai to a draw. Moreover, most of his combat power was placed on Gong Dai. He wanted to kill Gong Dai first before dealing with Gong Yimo. The fight was getting more and more strenuous. Gong Yimo felt a chill in her heart. She felt that she could not drag on like this. She had to think of another plan. But right at this moment, the cave shook violently. Banging sounds could be heard, as if something was hitting the mountain. At this moment, Snow seemed to have thought of something, and her relaxed demeanor changed. Not good. Someone is hitting the mountain pillar. The mountain pillar was actually the most important pillar that supported this space. The design of this place was exquisite. If someone tried to force their way in, as long as the mountain pillar was broken, the entire mountain would sink and crush them to death. When Gong Yimo heard this, she did not show any mercy. There can't be any outsiders here. Snow's eyes were red as he panicked. How can there not be? Only a blind man would know the safe passage to the sacred ground. He tricked us into taking this path first. If we don't die, he would take the safe passage and block our path first. He would break the mountain pillar and crush us to death. Saying that, he stopped and looked at Gong Yimo sternly. If you don't want to be crushed to death here, go and open the door. Gong Yimo and Gong Dai looked at each other. Gong Yimo said, who knows if you will do something when I open the door. At this moment, the mountain was shaking more and more violently. Large pieces of rocks fell from the top, scaring Snow so much that he hurriedly said, I won't. Open the door or we will all die here. The red light in Snow's eyes did not recede. But seeing this space on the verge of collapse, he was really anxious. Gong Yimo felt uneasy. If you want me to let you go, you have to hand over the poison in your hands. If he still had the poison in his hands, and he was not afraid of the poison's effects, wouldn't he be able to remain in his berserk state? That was too dangerous. Snow was unwilling. But this cave was obviously on the verge of collapse. He had no choice but to throw the bottle to Gong Yimo. Open the door. Gong Yimo also swiftly jumped to the door while Gong Dai stood behind her, glaring at Snow like a tiger watching its prey. Snow's killing intent towards him was very strong. Obviously his target was not only the so-called stone heart in the treasure deposit, but also Royal Sister. He could not let him have his way. Gong Yimo raised her head. On the stone door in front of her, there were many stamens in the center of the stone lotus. There were small holes in the stamens, just like stone straws. Snow hurriedly said, as long as the blood soaked those stamens, it would be done. The earth was shaking. Gong Yimo did not have time to think about anything else. She stretched out her right hand and tore off the cloth that was used to bandage her wound. She allowed the blood to be absorbed by the small holes in the stamens. After that, she actually saw the lotus closing up. Gong Yimo wanted to retract her hand, but Snow shouted, you cannot take it out. The lotus has not sucked enough blood and will not open the door. And the cave was really going to collapse. Gong Yimo had no choice but to allow those stone flower petals to close up and wrap around her hand. At this moment she was secretly regretting. This Snow clan's sacred ground was really filled with danger. It was her carelessness. But, she must get out. Suddenly Gong Yimo groaned. She felt the flower petals surrounding her hand, and those stamens seemed to be alive as they stabbed into her wound and crazily sucked her blood. At that moment Gong Yimo suddenly understood. Why did that blind man think that she would die here? It was because there was a possibility that her blood would be sucked dry by this stone door. But Snow did not want to lose her puppet the most. How could he allow such a thing to happen? Gong Dai realized that Gong Yimo's blood was flowing out very quickly and wanted to break this strange lotus. Snow immediately stopped him. Don't break it. Otherwise we will all die here. As he spoke, he suddenly took out a pill. What are you doing? Gong Dai grabbed his hand, thinking that Snow was up to no good. Snow was so anxious that veins popped out on his forehead. This pill can protect her heart meridians. I don't want her to die. At this moment the crashing sounds outside were still continuing. The cave was shaking non-stop. Royal Sister had obviously lost a lot of blood, but the door did not show any signs of opening. Gong Yimo said weakly, "No problem, I will eat it." She also felt that Snow had spent so much effort to obtain the stone heart to control her and would not let her die here. Gong Dai then let go of his hand. Indeed, the moment the pill entered her stomach, Gong Yimo felt that her body, which was about to be sucked dry, suddenly had strength. Her right hand, which was wrapped by the lotus flower petals, clenched into a fist. At that moment, the door finally opened. Snow was the first to run out. Gong Dai wanted to stop him. But Gong Yimo's hand was still stuck in the stone door and she could not leave. The cave was about to collapse. Chapter 548. Shuese turned her head and said maliciously, "It's easy to save her. Now that the door is open, you just need to break the mechanism above the stone lotus. The stone lotus will naturally loosen its grip." There was no time to lose. Gong Dai did not dare to chase after them. Saving Gong Yimo was more important. He hurriedly returned to the cave that was about to collapse. Seeing that there were many lotus flowers carved on the stone door, he quickly destroyed them with his sword. The stone was cut off, revealing the complicated mechanism inside. Gong Yimo saw him return and was shocked. "Quickly get out. This place is about to collapse." A sword appeared in her other hand. She clenched her teeth and said, "If there's really no other way, I'll just chop off this hand." If her right hand was chopped off, how could Gong Yimo be Shuese's opponent? Gong Dai did not want her to chop off her hand. He said in a low voice, "Wait a little longer. I will definitely save you." His tone was calm and determined, making Gong Yimo feel more at ease. She racked her brains to think of a way to escape. Large pieces of stone fell down. And the mechanism was made of unknown material, it was very sturdy. Gong Dai used all his strength. Finally, the shaft was cut off. The stone lotus loosened bit by bit. Before Gong Yimo could heave a sigh of relief, she heard a loud cracking sound. The mountain pillar was finally broken by that person. The cave was about to collapse. Gong Yimo had just pulled out her hand when a large piece of stone came crashing down on Gong Yimo. At the critical moment, Gong Dai pushed her forward. That stone smashed into his back and rolled down on his leg. Gong Dai. Gong Yimo turned around and saw Gong Dai spitting out a mouthful of blood and falling to the ground. And at that moment, even larger pieces of stone fell down on his leg and body. Gong Dai. She pounced over like a madwoman, trying to get rid of those stones. But it was useless. Sand and dust filled the air. If she did not leave now, she would be buried by the stones. The cracking sound was incessant. But Gong Yimo could no longer hear it. She couldn't think. She just grabbed his hand and pulled him out. She could not abandon Gong Dai. At this time, the snow outside was also anxious. He shouted, "Hurry up and leave. The mountain is collapsing." Gong Yimo acted as if she did not hear him. Her voice trembled as she said, "Gong Dai. Hold my hand tightly. Don't let go." Gong Yimo was afraid that he would give up, so she begged Gong Dai again and again to hold on to her hand so that she could save him. "Let's go." Gong Dai's entire body was in excruciating pain. He was stuck in the rocks and had no chance to escape. But that wasn't what he was worried about. It was Gong Yimo refusing to let go. The rumbling sound was getting louder and louder. Perhaps it would completely collapse in the next second. Royal sister can't die, she can't die. Why would Gong Yimo listen? The flying sand and stones left countless small wounds on her body. Such a woman who could remain calm even if Mount Tai collapsed on top of her head was actually flustered at this moment. There was only one thought in his mind. She wasn't afraid of death. But she couldn't leave Gong Dai here alone. She couldn't. "Gong Dai. Don't be afraid. I'll save you right away." Although Gong Yimo said that, she was about to cry. Half of the cave had collapsed and she had lost too much blood. She was powerless. How could she save Gong Dai? No. But she couldn't let go. She and Gong Dai's hands were tightly clasped. Her hands were trembling, no. Her entire body was trembling. So many people had died in front of her. Every time, her heart felt like it was going to split open from the pain. But she endured it all. She lived on and continued her unfinished mission. But Gong Dai couldn't. He couldn't. If he died, big drops of tears fell onto their interlocked hands. If he died, how could she live on? Gong Yimo tried to pull him a few times, but in the end, she stumbled and fell to the ground. She wanted to cry out loud. But she knew that crying was useless at this time. She could only pull his hand again and again, letting the big drops of tears fall. But there were so many rocks on Gong Dai's body and he didn't move at all. Gong Dai was seriously injured. The pressure between the rocks made him unable to breathe. He wanted Gong Yimo to leave. The farther the better. But his voice was drowned out by the sound of the collapse. Gong Yimo pretended not to hear him. A few times, the huge rocks brushed past Gong Yimo's head. Gong Dai stared with his eyes wide open. His heart seemed to stop beating. Her tears made his heart ache, but the imminent collapse made him even more frightened. He could die. But royal sister must live. Gong Dai. Woo woo. Gong Dai, Gong Yimo couldn't pull him away. She finally grabbed his hand with all her strength. She felt sticky blood on her fingertips. Her mind was in a mess. She seemed to have lost her rationality. This was the first time she felt so useless. Her brain had crashed. She felt weak all over. Did she have to watch Gong Dai die? Tears blurred her vision. That rock was clearly thrown at her. It was Gong Dai who pushed her, so she didn't die on the spot. How could he be so stupid? He could have lived. Royal sister, royal sister. Gong Dai suddenly called out to her. He used all his strength to wake Gong Yimo up. His voice made Gong Yimo, who was in a mess, seem to have found her backbone. His unfocused gaze suddenly focused. Then, she saw Gong Dai's face was covered in blood. He was in a sorry state, but his eyes were black and white, like the purest black jade. It was the only home in the world. She couldn't help but go closer and stare into his eyes. Royal sister. Listen to me. Gong Dai held her hand tightly. The corner of his mouth was bleeding, but he seemed to be smiling. At that moment, all the sounds in the surroundings seemed to have disappeared. She could only hear his voice. Royal sister. He gasped for breath. He held Gong Yimo's hand with both hands. His knuckles were white. It was as if every bit of strength represented his entire life. Meeting you. Falling in love with you. I have no regrets. Live on, Momo. After saying that, he gathered the last of his inner strength in his hand. He pushed Gong Yimo. He pushed Gong Yimo into the hands of Snow, who wanted to save her. Gong Dai. Another loud sound was heard. What answered her was a sky full of sand. Don't go. The mountain is going to collapse. Snow hugged her tightly and quickly retreated. The mountain was not going to collapse. It had already collapsed. It was sinking at a speed visible to the naked eye. At that moment, countless thoughts flashed through Gong Yimo's mind. She didn't know where she got the strength, but her lost rationality suddenly returned. Then, she fiercely bit Snow. Snow felt the pain and let go. Gong Yimo ran back like she was flying. Was she crazy? The mountain was going to collapse. Did she want to die? He wanted to chase after her, but the mountain was sinking violently. There were flying sand and rolling stones everywhere. If Gong Yimo ran back, how could she survive? He was unwilling to give up. He gritted his teeth and prepared to charge in. At this moment, huge stones rolled down, blocking his path. The entire mountain rumbled as it sank. Finally, it let out a muffled sound. It crushed the space below it. In an instant, the world was silent. Chapter 549. Snow's hand clenched into a fist. As he dodged the falling rocks, he looked at the mountain with unwillingness. He did not dare to go near. Gong Yimo was definitely dead, there was no point in him going back. What bad luck. He had spent so much effort. In the end, it was all for naught. His eyes flashed with an indescribable expression as he quickly calculated the gains and losses. He had to stay here and wait for the collapse to calm down before digging out Gong Yimo's body. Use her blood to open the door to the treasure. She was dead, but there was still the stone heart. Ordinary saint stones could temporarily affect people who were poisoned, but the conditions were too troublesome. He believed that as long as he had the stone heart, it would be much easier to control those crazy people. Now that Gong Yimo was dead, after he obtained the stone heart, he could still control the emperors of the 4 countries. Although the process was troublesome, there was no other way. If only Gong Yimo was not dead. At this time, a cold laugh came from behind him. Didn't you say it was the world extermination evil spirit? To die so easily, it is really disappointing. Blind held a hammer that was taller than him as he laughed cruelly. Snow quickly put up his guard. He felt that the effect of the poison in his body was gradually fading. It was obvious that his blood had almost detoxified the poison. And the medicine bottle that contained the poison was in Gong Yimo's hands. Now that he met Blind, it was really hard to leave. Blind could not see, but he seemed to feel his condition and laughed lightly. I said, if you want to enter the sacred ground, you have to step over my dead body. Saying that, he waved his huge hammer and pointed it at Snow. They are already dead, now, it is your turn. Snow knew that he was not Blind's opponent. He could only take advantage of the fact that the poison was still active. He had to find a chance to escape. You are really heartless. You killed Snow Lotus's daughter just like that. Blind laughed coldly when he heard that. His laughter was cold and hard, but it sounded a little depressed. I was born to protect the sacred ground. I am loyal to this land, not you, not master, and not all yen. When he said this, a steely determination appeared between his brows. Everyone who wants to disturb this land, only death awaits them. As the two of them spoke, they had already exchanged hundreds of blows. Snow observed that they were currently in the heart of the mountain range. It seemed like no one had set foot in this place for a long time. What he didn't know was that other than the path they came from, there were cliffs on both sides. Behind the blind man was the treasure he yearned for, but Gong Yimo's corpse was buried under a pile of rocks. Snow took a deep breath. Under the effect of the poison goose berserk transformation, his strength had doubled. Thus, when he used his most proficient concealment technique, his entire body seemed to have become one with the wind. Blind frowned. He could not see and could only hear. Other than the sound of the wind, there was nothing else. Suddenly, a faint fragrance of perfume flew past. He took advantage of his victory to pursue and attack. After a few moves, the iron hammer almost smashed into Snow's back. He did not expect the fragrance of Gong Yimo's powder to last so long. As he moved quickly, the fragrance became stronger. Snow cursed inwardly. Damn it! He took off his shoe and smashed it on Blind's face before disappearing again. Blind paused for a moment before continuing to chase. He was not in a hurry. At the end of both sides were cliffs. The only exit was behind him. The direction they came from had collapsed, so it was only a matter of time before he caught Snow. The two of them disappeared while chasing each other. They did not care about Gong Yimo. They felt that Gong Yimo was dead for sure. But was she really dead? In the narrow triangular space, the lotus-carved stone door was still standing. The beast-head stone door that should not have appeared here was lying diagonally on top of it. The two doors formed a stable triangle and a lady was currently gasping for breath. She had one hand on the beast-head stone door while Gong Dai's lower body was stuck in the cracks of the rocks beside the lotus door. Only his upper body was in this narrow triangular space. She made it. Before a huge rock fell, she took out the other half of the stone door from the space and placed it on top of the lotus door. If the beast-head stone door was not firm enough, it would be broken by the huge rock falling from above. Then what awaited the two of them was death. Luckily, after this half of the stone door was hit, it only gave out a dull sound. It did not break. Only then did they have the space to breathe. After the last dull sound, everything returned to normal. Only the lady's violent gasps could be heard clearly in this dead silent space. Gong Dai. The dust made Gong Yimo's voice dry and hoarse. Gong Dai was lying on the ground. The fine sand and stones made him look very miserable. Gong Yimo could not help but pat the sand and stones off his body. She lowered her head to listen to his heartbeat. Still alive. These few words were said by Gong Yimo in a pious tone. She had never felt that she was so lucky. She had never felt so grateful to the heavens. It did not take away Gong Dai. He was by her side. Next, Gong Yimo took out a flashlight from the space and put it aside. She wiped his face with water and fed him some water. After being nourished by the water, Gong Dai gradually woke up. He realized that he was not dead. He was still stuck in the crack of the mountain. Then he opened his eyes in horror. He suddenly grabbed Gong Yimo's hand. Gong Yimo had never seen him lose his composure like this before. That pair of beautiful black eyes were full of blood vessels as he stared at her. It was full of disbelief. You. His throat was dry and hoarse. His organs were in pain. He could not say another word after that. The flashlight illuminated the darkness and Gong Yimo's face. She looked at Gong Dai's eyes as if she wanted to eat him alive. She smiled foolishly. "I'm back." Gong Dai grabbed her hand and let it fall weakly. He did not want Gong Yimo to come back. She had lost too much blood and was already weak. If she came back, what else could she do other than die with him? Gong Yimo fed him a little more water. He propped himself up with both hands, and after drinking some more water, he was finally able to speak. "Why are you so silly?" His voice was hoarse. The ferocity from earlier had faded away. What was left was only heartache and helplessness. "You could have lived." Gong Yimo shook her head. "Without you, I won't go anywhere." Gong Dai choked. Instantly, he felt a lump in his throat. This might be the most beautiful words of love he had ever heard in his life. "Silly," he said dejectedly and angrily. However, his tone was not fierce at all. There was only helplessness, heartache, and sorrow. Gong Yimo knelt on the ground so that he could lie on her lap. Then, she fed him. Her expression was surprisingly tranquil. The little girl who was at a loss before had disappeared, replaced by a determined and calm Gong Ju. Gong Ju was trapped at this time. For a moment, he felt as if he had returned to his childhood when he couldn't even trust a chicken. As for his royal sister, she would never be beaten down, nor would she yield to anyone. But this time, he held Gong Yimo's hand and said seriously, "If you have a way, leave first. Don't worry about me." He could feel that his body was being crushed by the huge rock. His meridians and bones were broken. It was not easy for Gong Yimo to leave this place. If she wanted to take him away, she might die here. Gong Yimo stuffed a piece of snack into his mouth. "I'll take you away." You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.